You've been lied to about happiness. They told you it comes from success, from approval, from having everything figured out. But if that were true, why do so many people who have it all still feel empty? Why do you still feel restless, anxious, stuck in a loop of overthinking, unable to truly enjoy life? The truth is, happiness isn't something you chase. It's something you build from within. And Stoic philosophy holds the blueprint. For centuries, the greatest minds in history, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, unlocked the secret to peace, resilience, and true happiness, not through wishful thinking, but through unshakable mental strength, the kind that makes you calm in chaos, powerful in adversity, and untouchable by negativity. Tonight, as you listen to these lessons, something will change. Your mind will slow down. The weight on your shoulders will start to lift. You'll feel a sense of clarity, like fog clearing after a storm. And when you wake up tomorrow, you'll see the world differently, stronger, calmer, in control. This isn't just another audio to fall asleep to. This is a transformation waiting to happen. Are you ready? Let's begin. The mind is like a room filled with unfinished conversations, lingering regrets, and questions that have no immediate answers. The day ends, but thoughts do not. They pile up like clutter on a desk that never gets cleared, filling every quiet moment with restless noise. This is why so many people struggle to sleep, because the mind does not know how to stop processing. Yet, some of the greatest thinkers in history knew a secret, a way to cleanse the mind before bed, to quiet the chaos, and to wake up with a fresh start every single day. Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and other Stoic philosophers practiced a nightly review, a simple but powerful reflection ritual designed to bring closure to the day, reset the mind, and ensure a deep, undisturbed rest. This was not just a habit. It was a weapon against anxiety, a method for clearing the mind of excess weight, and a way to train the subconscious for wisdom and peace. Every night, they examined their thoughts, decisions, and emotions, not to dwell on mistakes, but to learn from them, to adjust, and to move forward without carrying unnecessary burdens into the next day. There was no room for guilt or regret in this process, only clarity. For the Stoics, the day was not complete until it had been properly closed. They understood that reflection was not an indulgence, but a necessity. Just as the body needs sleep to repair itself, the mind needs order and understanding before it can truly rest. Without this, it becomes restless, continuing to process unresolved emotions deep into the night, leading to shallow sleep, early waking, and a sense of exhaustion that never fully goes away. This is why Seneca journaled every night before bed, not to record events, but to examine his own mind. He believed that if he could observe himself objectively, without bias or self-judgment, he could correct his mistakes and refine his character. The goal was progress, not perfection, to become slightly wiser each day and to go to bed with a clear conscience. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, did the same. He ruled an empire, yet he took time to write down his thoughts, dissect his emotions, and prepare his mind for rest. He knew that the quality of his decisions depended on the clarity of his thoughts, and clarity could only be achieved through deliberate self-reflection. Every night they asked themselves three fundamental questions. What did I do well today? What could I have done better? What will I improve tomorrow? Each question served a distinct purpose. The first prevented self-criticism from turning into self-doubt. The second allowed for honest growth without unnecessary guilt. The third created a sense of purpose and direction, ensuring that every day was a step forward, no matter how small. Reflection rewires the brain in a profound way. Neuroscientists now confirm what the Stoics understood intuitively, that deliberate self-examination strengthens neural pathways associated with self-awareness, emotional regulation, and resilience. The brain, like a muscle, adapts to what it practices most. If it practices overthinking, it becomes an expert at stress. If it practices self-reflection, it becomes an expert at clarity. This is the difference between waking up with a mind that is refreshed and one that is still tangled in yesterday's problems. There is power in ending the day with intentional thought instead of mental exhaustion. The difference between carrying the weight of unfinished emotions into the next day and waking up feeling light and unburdened is as simple as pausing, reviewing, and closing the chapter on today before stepping into tomorrow. But most people never do this. They go to bed with thoughts half-formed, with worries lingering, and with no clear sense of resolution. They expect sleep to fix what they have not processed. But sleep alone does not bring peace. A mind that is still open to unfinished business cannot fully rest. The Stoics understood that peace is not found, it is created. By taking a few minutes before bed to review the day, they eliminated the need for their subconscious to process unfinished thoughts while they slept. They were not haunted by regrets or trapped in self-criticism. They knew exactly what needed improvement, accepted it, and moved forward. This is the practice that rewires the mind for peace. It is not complicated. It does not require hours of deep meditation or complex rituals. It is simply the discipline of closing the day with clarity, just as one would close a book before putting it away. And here is where it becomes powerful. The more consistently this is done, the more the brain learns to release stress automatically. Instead of replaying the past or fearing the future, it begins to accept each day as a complete cycle, processed, understood, and let go. This is why the nightly review is not just a way to sleep better, it is a way to live better. It strengthens emotional intelligence, enhances decision-making, and removes the weight of unnecessary mental burdens. It prevents small frustrations from accumulating into bigger stress. It turns self-criticism into self-improvement. And most importantly, it allows for true rest. Because sleep is not just about closing the eyes, it is about letting go. The person who goes to bed with unresolved thoughts will find them again in the morning. The person who reviews, processes, and releases them will wake up lighter, clearer, and stronger. This is the Stoic way of sleeping, not just as an act of physical rest, but as a practice of mental discipline and emotional clarity. And when this becomes a habit, life itself begins to transform. Each day becomes a step forward, not a cycle of repetition. Each mistake becomes a lesson, not a burden. Each night becomes a moment of peace, not a battlefield of thoughts. This is how the Stoics mastered sleep. This is how they mastered life. The way a person closes their day is the way they enter the next one. The Stoics understood this deeply. A restless night is not caused by the body's inability to sleep, but by the mind's refusal to let go. Mental closure is not a luxury. It is a necessity. The ability to step away from the unfinished, to release what cannot be controlled, and to detach from lingering emotions is what separates those who live with clarity from those who carry the burdens of yesterday into every tomorrow. Most people mistake exhaustion for rest. They believe that if the body is tired enough, sleep will come. But a tired body does not guarantee a rested mind. A day filled with stress, unresolved emotions, and half-finished thoughts does not simply disappear when the lights go out. The mind replays what was left incomplete, sorting through the unfinished business of the day like a restless machine, running long after the world has gone quiet. The Stoics knew that true rest comes not from collapsing into sleep, but from deliberately ending the day, closing it with intention, ensuring that nothing unnecessary lingers beyond its time. Letting go of unresolved worries before sleep is not about ignoring them. It is about understanding their weight. Worries that cannot be acted upon serve no purpose except to drain energy. The human brain is designed to seek resolution. When something is left undone, the mind fixates on it, believing that by keeping it alive, a solution will eventually appear. But the reality is that most problems do not need to be solved at night. They need to be set aside. They belong to the hours of action, not the hours of rest. The Stoics trained themselves to recognize which thoughts were worth engaging with and which ones were simply mental noise. They understood that not all problems need immediate attention. They practiced emotional detachment, not as a form of coldness, but as a way of maintaining clarity. Seneca spoke of how most suffering comes not from what happens, but from the thoughts people attach to what happens. At night, this attachment becomes even more destructive. A single worry can expand into a storm of emotions, turning what was once a small concern into an overwhelming force. But the moment one steps back and observes thoughts without reacting, they lose their power. Mental closure requires separating what is real from what is exaggerated by the mind's tendency to ruminate. The Stoics used logic as a tool for calming emotions. If something can be fixed, it will be handled tomorrow. If it cannot be fixed, worrying about it now will not change anything. This simple but profound mindset shift is the difference between lying awake, consumed by what-ifs, and falling asleep with a mind at peace. Unfinished business is a source of endless suffering. The mind does not like loose ends, a conversation that was cut short, a decision that was left unresolved, an argument that was never properly closed. These are the things that keep people tossing and turning at night. The Stoic approach was never to leave something incomplete if it could be handled in the moment. But they also understood that some things are meant to remain unfinished, at least for now. Life does not operate in perfect conclusions. Some conflicts are not resolved in a single day. Some emotions take time to settle. Some answers do not yet exist. To accept this is to free oneself from the illusion that everything must be controlled. There is an art to closing the day properly. The Stoics viewed it as a ritual, a moment of reflection in which the day is put in order. This does not mean replaying every event obsessively. It means reviewing with clarity, taking responsibility for mistakes without unnecessary guilt, and deciding that whatever was left undone will not interfere with the ability to rest. Closure is a choice. The mind does not naturally shut off. It must be trained. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. Many believe it means feeling nothing, distancing oneself from life, or avoiding deep connections. But the Stoics saw it differently. Detachment is the ability to feel fully while remaining in control. It is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. When something painful happens, the instinct is to hold on to the feeling, to let it define the moment. But the truth is, emotions are temporary by nature. The more one clings to them, the heavier they become. At night, when the world is quiet, emotions tend to amplify. Worries that seemed small during the day become enormous. Regrets resurface with greater intensity. The mind, free from distraction, turns inward, replaying events with a sense of urgency that does not belong to the present moment. The Stoics knew that the way to avoid this spiral was not by suppressing emotions, but by allowing them to pass without resistance. Instead of engaging with every thought, they observed them from a distance. Not every feeling needs to be acted upon. Not every thought needs to be followed. Techniques for emotional detachment begin with awareness. Most people believe they are in control of their thoughts, but in reality, thoughts control them. The Stoics trained themselves to break this pattern. When a worry surfaced, they did not engage with it immediately. They questioned it. Is this problem real, or is it exaggerated by emotion? Is it something that must be solved tonight, or can it wait? Will worrying about this improve the situation in any way? The moment a person questions a thought, its power weakens. Most worries do not survive rational examination. They exist because they go unchecked. This is why mental closure is so powerful. It forces the mind to organize itself, to separate what matters from what is simply noise. Another Stoic practice was viewing life from a greater perspective. They understood that what seems urgent today will often be meaningless in a year. They trained themselves to see beyond the immediate, to recognize that life is constantly shifting, and most concerns will pass, whether one worries about them or not. A mind that learns to zoom out sees with greater clarity. It stops being trapped in the small moments of stress and begins to understand the larger picture. Rituals are essential for closure. The mind responds to habit. If it learns that certain actions signal the end of the day, it begins to release tension naturally. The Stoics developed routines that prepared the mind for rest. Some wrote in journals to process emotions. Others engaged in brief contemplation, reviewing the day with calm objectivity. The key was creating a clear boundary between wakefulness and sleep, a signal to the brain that the time for thinking had ended. Breath control was another powerful tool. The connection between breathing and emotional state is often overlooked. Rapid, shallow breaths signal stress. Deep, controlled breaths signal calm. The Stoics understood that by changing the breath, they could change the mind. When emotions felt overwhelming, slowing the breath was enough to regain control. But the final and most important lesson of mental closure is acceptance. Many people struggle with sleep because they fight against reality. They replay events, wishing they had acted differently. They anticipate the future, fearing what is to come. They resist the truth of what is. The Stoics saw this as self-inflicted suffering. Peace does not come from changing the past or predicting the future. It comes from fully accepting the present moment as it is. Life is full of unresolved moments. Not everything will be neatly tied together at the end of each day. But peace is not about perfection. It is about knowing when to let go. The Stoics did not waste their nights wrestling with what they could not control. They ended their days with discipline and clarity, trusting that tomorrow would bring what it would bring. When this practice becomes a habit, life begins to transform. The past no longer lingers. The future no longer creates unnecessary fear. Sleep becomes deep, unburdened, restorative. Each morning begins fresh, without the weight of yesterday pressing down. This is how the Stoics mastered the art of ending the day. This is how they freed themselves from the mental chains that keep so many people awake at night. And this is how true peace is built, not through avoidance, but through the discipline of knowing when to engage and when to release. The ability to let go at the end of the day determines the quality of life itself. The mind, left unchecked, clings to unresolved thoughts, unfinished conversations, and emotions that no longer serve any purpose. Without mental closure, rest remains shallow. Sleep becomes an extension of daytime stress, and each new day starts with the weight of the past still pressing down. But letting go is only part of the process. True peace requires something deeper, the absence of mental noise. The ability to detach from unnecessary thoughts is not enough if new ones keep flooding in. This is why the Stoics valued silence, not as an absence of sound, but as a practice of discipline, a method of clearing the mind from the distractions that prevent clarity. Most people never experience real silence. The world is louder than it has ever been, and the mind has adapted to constant input. From the moment people wake up, they are bombarded with news, notifications, conversations, background music, and endless digital distractions. There is no space for stillness. Thoughts are no longer formed naturally, but dictated by external noise. Before bed, instead of settling into quiet reflection, most people drown in stimulation, scrolling through their phones, absorbing content, feeding the mind with fragmented information that has no relevance but demands attention. Sleep does not stand a chance against this level of noise. The mind, overstimulated, does not slow down when the body does. Instead, it continues processing the flood of input long into the night, turning every quiet moment into a battlefield of thoughts. The Stoics understood that overstimulation is not just a distraction, it is a thief of inner peace. The mind, when filled with unnecessary information, becomes reactive. Small problems feel larger, emotions become exaggerated, and the ability to think clearly is compromised. When a person cannot control what enters their mind, they cannot control their emotions, decisions, or actions. They become prisoners of external noise. This is why the practice of silence was so important. It was not about avoiding sound, it was about choosing what enters the mind. At night, this practice becomes even more essential. Sleep is not just a physical process, it is a mental one. The mind needs time to transition from activity to stillness. If it is filled with noise before bed, it doesn't know how to be quiet. This is why so many people struggle with racing thoughts the moment they try to sleep. They believe it is the result of stress, but often it is simply an untrained mind reacting to overstimulation. The brain, accustomed to constant engagement, does not know how to stop. Quiet contemplation before sleep is the antidote to this. It is a deliberate shift from passive consumption to active awareness. Instead of feeding the mind more distractions, the Stoics practiced stillness. This was a time to step away from external noise, to let the mind breathe, to allow thoughts to settle instead of being forced into new directions. Unlike mindless entertainment, contemplation has a cleansing effect. It clears unnecessary thoughts, strengthens self-awareness, and prepares the mind for real rest. The ability to be alone with one's thoughts is one of the rarest skills in the modern world. People avoid silence because they are afraid of what they might find. Distractions act as a shield against deeper self-awareness. But the Stoics embraced solitude. They understood that the mind, left undisturbed, is capable of finding its own clarity. Problems that seem overwhelming shrink in silence. Emotions that feel intense soften. What was once confusing becomes clear. Silence does not create peace. It reveals it. The ancient world was naturally quieter, but even then, the Stoics sought moments of intentional solitude. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, valued time alone. He would retreat into silence, away from the demands of power, to reflect without interruption. Seneca wrote about the dangers of excessive noise, not just external sound, but the noise created by constant mental chatter. They both knew that true clarity requires space. A crowded mind has no room for wisdom. In the modern world, silence is a rare luxury, but it is more necessary than ever. The mind, flooded with information, loses its ability to filter what matters from what does not. It jumps from one thought to another, never settling, never resting. This is why people feel exhausted even after doing nothing. Their minds have been working overtime, absorbing everything, processing everything, but never coming to any real conclusions. They do not need more sleep. They need more stillness. Most people think relaxation is about adding something, listening to music, watching a show, distracting the mind. But true relaxation comes from removing what is unnecessary. Silence is not empty. It is full of clarity, space, and understanding. When the mind is no longer distracted by useless input, it finds natural peace. This is why the Stoics saw silence as a source of power, not a lack of engagement. A quiet mind is not a passive mind. It is a trained one. It does not react to every external influence. It chooses its focus. There is a reason why great thinkers, leaders, and philosophers all valued solitude. Ideas do not come from noise. Wisdom does not emerge from distraction. Clarity is only possible in stillness. The ability to sit in silence before bed is one of the most powerful practices a person can develop. It strengthens discipline, improves decision-making, and allows the mind to reset without external interference. But silence is not just about avoiding distractions. It is about learning to be comfortable in stillness. Many people fear silence because it forces them to face themselves. They distract themselves to avoid discomfort. But discomfort is not the enemy. It is the doorway to growth. The Stoics knew that what is avoided does not disappear. It waits. By embracing silence, by allowing the mind to settle without interference, a person builds mental resilience. This is why the greatest thinkers in history all valued time alone. They knew that wisdom is not found in constant activity, but in deliberate stillness. The modern world teaches that productivity is measured by how much one does. The Stoics measured it by how well one thinks, and thinking requires silence. Before bed, the mind must transition from consumption to reflection. If the last moments of the day are spent absorbing random information, the mind carries it into sleep. If those moments are spent in stillness, the mind learns to let go. The choice is simple: a restless night or a clear one, a mind filled with noise or a mind that is trained to rest. This is why the Stoics valued silence as a practice, not an accident. It was not something that happened by chance. It was something they created. They knew that in a world full of distractions, silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of clarity. Stillness is not the absence of thought, but the presence of clarity. The more the mind is bombarded with noise, the more it becomes reactive, incapable of distinguishing between what is essential and what is merely distraction. True rest is found not in the absence of external sound, but in the discipline of inner silence. The Stoics understood that clearing the mind before sleep was not enough. The next step was preparing it. A mind that is trained to think deeply, to process reality without fear, and to embrace all possibilities without resistance, is a mind that does not break under pressure. Most people go to bed hoping for comfort. They push away unpleasant thoughts, avoid difficult emotions, and seek refuge in distractions. But avoidance is not peace. What is suppressed does not disappear. It waits. It lingers in the background, shaping thoughts, emotions, and reactions in ways that remain unnoticed until stress becomes unbearable. The Stoics did not seek comfort at the expense of truth. They practiced something that most people would consider strange, even disturbing. Instead of avoiding uncomfortable thoughts, they deliberately confronted them. They visualized loss, misfortune, and hardship, not to invite suffering, but to become resilient against it. Negative visualization was not a form of pessimism, but an act of mental preparation. A person who has already considered the worst possible outcome is no longer controlled by fear. If they have rehearsed loss in their mind, they do not break when life takes something away. If they have accepted the possibility of failure, they do not collapse under pressure. This practice rewires the brain, reducing anxiety instead of increasing it. The mind, when left unchecked, creates unrealistic expectations. It assumes that comfort will last, that loved ones will always be there, that success will be permanent. This illusion makes even the smallest disruptions feel unbearable. But when a person trains themselves to consider loss before it happens, they do not experience the same shock when life inevitably brings change. This practice is deeply misunderstood. Many believe that thinking about misfortune creates unnecessary fear, but the opposite is true. It is the avoidance of reality that makes people fragile. Those who refuse to consider loss live in denial, and when it arrives, they are completely unprepared. The Stoics understood that everything in life is temporary: health, relationships, material possessions, status, even life itself. Nothing is owned, only borrowed. Those who cling to what they love as if it is permanent live in constant fear of losing it. But those who accept its impermanence experience deeper appreciation and greater resilience. Imagining loss does not mean wishing for it. It is not a practice of inviting negativity, but of making peace with reality. A person who has trained themselves to accept that misfortune can happen at any moment stops taking things for granted. They wake up with gratitude, not entitlement. They cherish their relationships instead of assuming they will always be there. They appreciate the simple moments in life instead of rushing through them mindlessly. Negative visualization does not remove joy, it enhances it. Most people assume that gratitude comes naturally, but it does not. The mind adapts quickly to comfort. What was once exciting becomes ordinary. A person who gets what they want quickly forgets what it was like to be without it. This is why wealth, success, and security do not guarantee happiness. A person who never considers loss becomes numb to what they have. The Stoics reversed this. They reminded themselves daily of how fragile life is, how easily everything could change, how nothing is promised. This did not make them fearful, it made them deeply appreciative. This is why negative visualization is not a depressing exercise, but an empowering one. It strips away illusions, making clear what truly matters. When a person considers the possibility of losing what they love, they start treating it differently. They speak with more kindness, listen with more patience, and experience life with more depth. A person who has meditated on the temporary nature of life does not waste time on meaningless arguments, petty frustrations, or chasing things that bring no real fulfillment. The ability to handle worst-case scenarios calmly is a skill that is developed, not something a person is born with. Those who panic in times of crisis do so because they have never mentally prepared for hardship. Their expectations were set on comfort, so when discomfort arrives, they do not know how to process it. But those who have trained themselves to accept misfortune before it happens react differently. They are not immune to pain, but they are not controlled by it. They do not resist reality, and because of that, they move through it with strength instead of despair. The Stoics understood that most suffering does not come from events themselves, but from the way the mind reacts to them. When a person refuses to accept loss, it becomes unbearable. When they expect life to be free of hardship, every difficulty feels like an injustice. But when the mind is trained to see adversity as part of life, there is no need for panic. There is only preparation. A person who has already visualized failure does not waste energy on shock when it happens. They move directly to action. They adjust, they adapt, they endure. Training the mind in this way requires consistency. Negative visualization is not something to be done once and then forgotten. It is a daily practice, a reminder that nothing is guaranteed, that everything is borrowed, that the only thing within control is the way one responds to life. This is why the Stoics rehearsed misfortune in their minds, not to dwell in negativity, but to remove its power. A person who expects hardship and meets it with calmness remains unshaken. A person who refuses to think about hardship is broken by the smallest inconvenience. This practice also prevents unnecessary fear. Most anxiety comes from the fear of the unknown. The mind, when left unchecked, fills in gaps with worst-case scenarios, exaggerating risks, creating panic over things that have not even happened. But when a person has already considered every possible outcome, they are no longer paralyzed by uncertainty. They have seen the worst and accepted it. There is no room for fear when a person has already made peace with whatever may come. This is why the greatest Stoic thinkers approached life with a calmness that confused those around them. When others were frantic, they remained steady. When others were consumed by fear, they were already prepared. They were not indifferent. They were disciplined. They knew that everything was temporary, and because of that, they were able to fully embrace every moment, every opportunity, every experience without attachment. A person who has trained themselves in negative visualization wakes up differently. They do not take the morning for granted. They are not frustrated by small inconveniences. They do not waste their energy complaining about things that do not matter. They have already rehearsed the possibility that the day could be filled with loss, hardship, or difficulty, and because of that, they approach it with gratitude instead of expectation. There is no way to avoid loss in life. There is no way to guarantee that things will stay the same. But there is a way to prepare for it, to remove the unnecessary suffering caused by denial, and to live in a state of appreciation rather than assumption. The Stoics understood that most people suffer twice, once in reality, and again in their refusal to accept it. By practicing negative visualization, they removed the second layer of suffering. They did not fear the future, because they had already faced it in their minds. This is the paradox of peace. It does not come from avoiding discomfort, but from training the mind to be comfortable with anything. A person who has imagined loss does not cling to things that are out of their control. A person who has accepted impermanence does not live in fear. A person who has rehearsed the worst wakes up every day with a sense of freedom because they are not weighed down by illusions. Negative visualization does not make life darker. It makes it brighter. It removes the fog of assumption, sharpening awareness, deepening appreciation, and strengthening resilience. This is why the Stoics practiced it consistently. It was not about pessimism. It was about freedom from fear, gratitude for what exists, and the ability to move through life with unwavering calmness. Fear loses its grip when confronted directly. The mind, when trained to anticipate loss, no longer breaks under its weight. Negative visualization is not about inviting suffering, but about creating strength before it is needed. The person who has already faced discomfort in their thoughts does not panic when life demands resilience. But there is another level of preparation, one that moves beyond accepting what may happen and into actively predicting and solving problems before they arise. The Stoics did not only prepare for hardship, they trained themselves to identify obstacles in advance, assess their impact, and develop a plan before reality forced them to react. A person who waits for problems to appear before thinking about them is already at a disadvantage. They enter every challenge blind, reacting instead of responding, losing time to fear before moving to action. This is why the Stoics practiced a pre-mortem of their problems, a method of forecasting obstacles before they occur, so that they could meet them with clarity instead of hesitation. Instead of fearing what might go wrong, they examined it in detail. They studied potential failures, predicted weaknesses, and built solutions before challenges arrived. This was not paranoia. It was control. Most people hope things will go smoothly, assuming that if they do not think about problems, they will not exist. But life does not reward those who avoid difficulty. It rewards those who are prepared for it. The Stoics understood that it is not the presence of obstacles that causes suffering, but the shock of encountering them unprepared. A person who foresees struggle does not feel betrayed by life when it appears. They do not waste energy wishing things were different. They are already mentally equipped to handle what comes. Before bed, the mind naturally replays unfinished thoughts. It runs through the events of the day, sorts through decisions, and lingers on what remains unresolved. But most people let this process happen passively. They do not guide it. They do not direct it. They do not use it as a tool for growth. Instead of allowing the subconscious to replay worries aimlessly, the Stoics used the night as a time for strategy. They asked themselves, what problems might arise tomorrow? What challenges might block progress? Where might I fail? By addressing these questions in advance, they placed themselves in a position of control. When the morning came, they were not reacting to unexpected difficulties. They were executing a plan they had already considered. Their subconscious had been working on solutions overnight, processing possibilities, filtering unnecessary fears, and focusing energy on what could actually be done. This practice transformed uncertainty into confidence. It replaced hesitation with calm, deliberate action. The subconscious mind does not sleep the way the body does. It continues working, sorting through information, making connections, and finding solutions in the background. This is why people often wake up with sudden realizations, why clarity emerges after rest, why problems that felt overwhelming at night seem smaller in the morning. But for most, this process happens by accident. The Stoics made it intentional. Instead of going to bed with vague worries, they fed their mind specific problems to solve. They framed their concerns as challenges, not threats, and trusted their subconscious to refine answers while they slept. This is why structured reflection before bed is powerful. It is not just about clearing the mind. It is about training it to work for you while you rest. When the brain is directed toward a specific task, it continues processing that task, even in sleep. But if it is left to wander, it wastes energy on unnecessary fears, recycling stress without progress. The Stoics understood that the way the mind is directed before sleep determines the quality of thinking that follows in the morning. A person who goes to bed with uncertainty wakes up with doubt. A person who goes to bed with clarity and purpose wakes up stronger than before. Epictetus taught that anxiety is not the result of external events, but of misunderstanding them. Fear is created by assumptions, by exaggerations, by the mind's tendency to catastrophize what it does not fully examine. The person who does not analyze their worries remains a prisoner of them. But the moment an anxious thought is broken down logically, it loses its power. This is why the Stoics believed that no problem should be faced emotionally before it is examined through reason. A mind that operates on unchecked fear does not make good decisions. It jumps to conclusions, avoids discomfort, and reacts impulsively. But a mind trained in rational analysis remains steady. It does not rush to judgment. It does not spiral into panic. It sees clearly because it forces every concern to be examined fully. This is why pre-mortem thinking is essential. Instead of letting anxiety shape perception, it forces perception to be shaped by truth. Most fears, when analyzed, are far smaller than they first appear. They exist because they have never been challenged. The person who assumes failure will be devastating never actually defines what failure means. They never break it down into specific consequences. They never ask, what is the worst that could actually happen? What would I do next? How much of this fear is real, and how much is my mind creating unnecessary panic? By asking these questions, the mind shifts from reactive fear to active problem solving. It stops running from discomfort and starts deconstructing it. It takes control of the unknown instead of allowing the unknown to control it. This shift alone removes half the weight of anxiety. The best time to practice this is before sleep. The mind, when left to its own devices, will either wander aimlessly or fixate on the wrong things. But when it is given a clear task, it works efficiently. A person who spends a few minutes before bed forecasting obstacles is not feeding their mind stress. They are programming it for resilience. Instead of waking up with a vague sense of unease, they wake up with a sense of direction. Their subconscious has already sorted through the difficulties, filtered out unnecessary fears, and prepared solutions before they even open their eyes. Most people live reactively. They respond to problems only after they happen. They wait until stress is unavoidable before addressing it. But the Stoics understood that life rewards those who anticipate difficulty, not those who ignore it. They trained themselves to think ahead, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. They removed anxiety by replacing it with strategy. The person who has already considered their challenges does not waste time being surprised by them. They do not waste energy on panic. They move forward with a mind that has already rehearsed the battle. This is why pre-mortem thinking is so powerful. It does not just prepare the mind, it strengthens it. It conditions the brain to expect difficulty, analyze it logically, and move through it without hesitation. A person who practices this consistently begins to think differently. They stop fearing struggle because they have already faced it in their mind. They stop feeling overwhelmed because they have already dissected their fears into manageable parts. They no longer wake up uncertain. They wake up knowing that no matter what the day brings, they have already prepared for it. This is how the Stoics built unshakable mental resilience. They did not leave their reactions to chance. They trained themselves to process difficulty before it arrived. They transformed anxiety into clarity, hesitation into confidence, and uncertainty into an advantage. A person who does this regularly no longer sees obstacles as threats. They see them as part of life. They know that struggle will come, but they also know that their mind has already prepared for it. This is not just a strategy. It is a way of living without fear, without unnecessary stress, and without the illusion that life should always be easy. This is why the Stoics slept deeply and woke up strong, not because their lives were without difficulty, but because they had already faced every possible difficulty in their minds before reality ever tested them. The way the mind is directed before sleep determines how it will function upon waking. A person who goes to bed filled with unresolved worries and scattered thoughts does not experience true rest. They merely enter a cycle where stress lingers beneath the surface, shaping dreams, deepening fatigue, and ensuring that the next day begins on the same note of unease. The Stoics did not allow their minds to operate by chance. They trained their thoughts with precision, understanding that the final moments before sleep were not just a passive transition, but a critical opportunity to program the subconscious for clarity, resilience, and peace. Anticipating problems before they arise allows the mind to approach the day with control, but preparation alone is not enough. Even a well-trained mind can be sabotaged if it is not given the right final input before sleep. Thoughts, like seeds, take root in the subconscious. What is planted before sleep continues to grow throughout the night. A person who drifts off with frustration, regret, or anxiety unknowingly feeds these emotions, reinforcing negative thought patterns that will carry over into the next day. The Stoics understood that mental conditioning does not stop when the eyes close. The subconscious absorbs whatever dominates attention before sleep, strengthening those ideas and making them the foundation of the following day's mindset. Marcus Aurelius believed that thoughts determine happiness. The mind is not shaped by external events, but by how those events are perceived. If left undirected, it will absorb whatever emotional residue remains from the day, unfiltered, unchallenged, and unchecked. The final thoughts before sleep become the subconscious blueprint. This is why what one thinks about last matters more than anything else. The Stoics trained themselves to direct these thoughts deliberately, choosing not to let their minds be ruled by random emotions or distractions, but by principles that would lead to a stronger, clearer, and more peaceful state of being. A restless mind does not happen by accident. It is a result of allowing thoughts to remain undisciplined. Just as the body needs intentional relaxation before sleep, the mind requires deliberate conditioning. The world does not slow down when night falls. Information continues to flood in, emotions linger, and thoughts remain entangled in the events of the day. Without a clear process to transition into stillness, the subconscious does not receive a signal to let go. This is why many people wake up already feeling drained, because their minds never truly rested. They carried yesterday's mental weight into today, unaware that it was entirely within their control to prevent it. Training the mind to enter sleep with calmness is not about avoiding difficult thoughts. It is about choosing what the subconscious will work on overnight. The Stoics knew that the mind does not stop processing during sleep. It continues sorting through emotions, reinforcing ideas, and preparing the psyche for the next day. This means that whatever dominates the last few minutes before sleep is what the mind will amplify. The person who falls asleep dwelling on stress does not simply leave it behind. They wake up more anxious. The person who cultivates gratitude, clarity, or resilience before sleep strengthens those qualities effortlessly. The key to mastering this is understanding that the mind responds to repetition, not randomness. A single night of positive reflection will not undo years of habitual overthinking. But when the same mental pattern is practiced nightly, the subconscious adapts to it as the default state. This is how the Stoics trained themselves to maintain inner stability, not through momentary effort, but through consistent mental discipline. They understood that small, intentional actions before sleep determine the emotional tone of an entire day. The most effective way to implement this is to take control of the last thoughts before sleep. This is not a vague process of thinking positively. It is an active practice, a structured approach to ensuring that the mind does not wander into unhelpful directions. The first step is choosing a dominant thought, one that is clear, constructive, and aligned with inner strength. This could be a principle, a lesson from the day, an affirmation of resilience, or a reminder of gratitude. The key is specificity. The mind must be given a clear mental focus point to prevent it from slipping into its usual patterns of worry and distraction. Marcus Aurelius used this practice every night. Before sleep, he would reflect on his values, reminding himself of what truly mattered. He would reinforce the idea that he was in control of his mind, not the world around him. He understood that by choosing thoughts consciously, he was designing his emotional state for the following day. He knew that if he went to bed with a focused mind, he would wake up with one. The second step is eliminating mental clutter. The mind cannot hold two dominant thoughts at once. If it is focused on what is essential, there is no room for unnecessary worries. Instead of trying to empty the mind, the Stoics replaced distractions with purpose. They understood that attempting to suppress thoughts only strengthens them. Instead, they redirected attention toward thoughts that served them. The third step is repetition. The subconscious absorbs whatever it is exposed to most frequently. If the last thought before sleep is chosen intentionally every night, the mind begins to accept it as normal operating logic. This is how fear is dismantled and how resilience is reinforced. What starts as a practice becomes a habit. What begins as effort becomes second nature. One of the most overlooked aspects of this process is the effect on emotional regulation. A person who struggles with emotional swings often believes that their feelings are unpredictable, but emotions do not appear randomly. They are the result of mental conditioning over time. The person who consistently reinforces fear, regret, or resentment before sleep will wake up with those emotions strengthened. But the person who programs their mind for calmness, acceptance, and inner strength will wake up with a natural sense of clarity. The emotions that dominate the first moments of the morning are the ones that were planted the night before. This is why the Stoics took such care in what they allowed into their minds at the end of the day. They did not let social distractions dictate their mental state. They did not let unresolved frustrations become the foundation of tomorrow's thoughts. They did not leave the state of their minds to chance. They took control of it every night, without exception. The impact of this practice extends far beyond sleep. A person who consistently shapes their last thought before sleep begins to reshape their entire way of thinking. Their reactions to stress change. Their ability to remain composed improves. They become less vulnerable to external chaos because their minds are no longer conditioned to operate from a place of reactivity. They stop allowing circumstances to determine their emotions. Instead, they enter each day already calibrated for stability. This is not an overnight transformation. It is a slow but profound shift in mental structure. The mind, trained consistently, adapts in ways that are often unnoticed at first. But over time, there is a fundamental difference in how life is experienced. The same events that once triggered frustration no longer have the same effect. The same challenges that once felt overwhelming are now handled with steady composure. The same sources of stress that once consumed energy are now approached with clarity. The most powerful change is that the subconscious starts working in one's favor instead of against them. It begins filtering thoughts more effectively. It stops holding on to useless worries. It stops reinforcing negative cycles. Instead, it strengthens the ideas that have been deliberately programmed before sleep. The person who once struggled with emotional instability now experiences natural, effortless calm. not because their circumstances changed, but because their mind has been trained to process reality differently. This is the power of the last thought before sleep. It is not a small detail. It is a tool that determines whether a person drifts through life as a prisoner of their own subconscious programming, or as someone who has trained their mind to work for them instead of against them. The Stoics understood that life does not grant control over external events, but it does offer control over the way the mind processes those events. This is why they treated the moments before sleep as sacred, as an opportunity to reinforce strength, stability, and wisdom. They knew that what they chose to think about in the final moments of wakefulness would shape the quality of their consciousness the next day. A person who understands this no longer wastes those moments. They no longer fall asleep in distraction. They no longer surrender their mind to randomness. They take control, just as the Stoics did, knowing that by mastering the last thought before sleep, they are mastering the way they will live. The final thought before sleep is not just a momentary reflection. It is a seed planted deep into the subconscious, shaping perception, emotions, and the way the next day unfolds. The Stoics understood that this process is not just about calming the mind. It is about aligning the mind with reality. But what is reality if not the awareness of life's impermanence? A thought that many resist, but those who embrace it find a depth of peace and gratitude that cannot be shaken. If the way the mind is directed before sleep determines the quality of rest and clarity, then there is no greater clarity than recognizing that this night could be the last. Not in a way that induces fear, but in a way that dissolves it entirely. Most people approach life with the assumption that time is abundant, that days stretch endlessly into the future, that what is left unfinished can always be handled tomorrow. But the Stoics saw this assumption as the root of much suffering. It creates procrastination, fuels attachment to trivial matters, and allows people to take for granted what should be cherished. The antidote is simple but profound, reminding oneself every night that this could be the final sleep. Not as a morbid exercise, but as a tool for awakening deeper appreciation for what exists. This practice is called memento mori, the act of remembering death. It is not about fixating on loss, but about eliminating illusion. Those who live in denial of death live in denial of life. They postpone what matters, assume second chances, and waste time on distractions. But those who confront mortality directly free themselves from these illusions. They do not wait to express gratitude. They do not delay important actions, and they do not allow their days to be filled with meaningless stress. Before bed, the Stoics would reflect on their mortality as a way of grounding themselves. They would ask, "If this were my last night, would I be at peace with how I live today? Have I left any words unspoken? Have I taken anything for granted? Have I wasted time on things that do not matter?" This was not an exercise in regret. It was a method for clarifying priorities, eliminating unnecessary burdens, and ensuring that each day was lived with presence. The impact of this practice is immediate. A person who reminds themselves of death before sleep no longer feels weighed down by trivial frustrations. Minor inconveniences lose their power. Petty arguments dissolve. Complaints that once seemed important suddenly feel foolish. The awareness that life is temporary removes the ability to waste energy on things that do not add meaning. Instead, what remains is a quiet appreciation for what is still within reach. The reason most people suffer from stress and anxiety is not because life is inherently difficult, but because they treat everything as if it is of equal importance. They react to small problems as if they are life-altering crises. They allow minor discomforts to consume their emotions. But when a person truly absorbs the reality of death, their entire perspective shifts. They stop sweating over what does not matter. They no longer give power to situations that, in the grand scheme of things, are meaningless. This is why the Stoics referred to sleep as a mini-death. It is the closest experience to non-existence that can be had each night. Every night, consciousness fades. Control is surrendered. The world continues, but the individual is no longer aware of it. In this way, every night is a rehearsal for what is inevitable. Instead of fearing this truth, the Stoics used it as a source of freedom. If each night is a kind of death, then each morning is a rebirth. A new chance, a moment that was never promised but has been granted. This shift in thinking removes entitlement. A person who embraces mortality does not wake up annoyed at small inconveniences. They do not drag themselves through the day, dreading responsibilities. They do not take for granted the people around them. They wake up knowing that this day is a privilege, not a guarantee. Their mind is no longer preoccupied with complaints, but focused on what truly holds value. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, reflected on death constantly. He reminded himself daily that he would one day vanish like everyone before him, not to depress himself, but to remind himself to live well. He knew that the awareness of mortality did not bring despair, it brought clarity. It stripped away the noise, allowing him to focus only on what was essential. This is the power of memento mori. It is not about preparing for death. It is about learning how to live fully before it arrives. Most people avoid thinking about death because they assume it will create fear. But the Stoics discovered that the opposite is true. It is not the thought of death that creates suffering. It is the refusal to acknowledge it. The avoidance of mortality does not make it disappear. It only ensures that it will strike harder when it finally comes. But the person who has meditated on it regularly is never caught off guard. They have already come to terms with it. They have made peace with its presence, and because of that, they are free. This practice also eliminates attachment to things that do not bring real happiness. When a person knows their time is limited, they stop chasing validation. They no longer seek approval from those who do not matter. They no longer obsess over material possessions, status, or temporary pleasures. They realize that none of these things will accompany them when their time is up. What remains? The way they have lived, the relationships they have nurtured, the wisdom they have gained. There is a reason why so many people waste their lives worrying about things that in the end mean nothing. They believe they have time to waste. They assume they can always do things later. But later is never promised. The Stoics saw this illusion clearly, and they broke free from it by reminding themselves of death every night. This awareness removed hesitation. It removed doubt. It forced them to act on what mattered, to resolve conflicts before they became permanent, to express love before it was too late, to live without postponing what was most important. Before sleep, reflecting on mortality is a tool for cleansing the mind. It allows a person to release the day with acceptance, knowing that if this were their last night, they have lived with integrity. They do not go to bed clinging to regrets. They do not hold on to grudges. They do not let unfinished emotions weigh them down. They close their eyes with a mind that is light, clear, and at peace. This is not an exercise in negativity. It is an exercise in awakening. It is a practice that removes illusions, stripping life down to what is real, what is meaningful, what is worth holding on to. A person who engages with this practice stops living reactively. They stop allowing themselves to be distracted by what does not matter. They become present in a way they never were before. The person who goes to sleep with this awareness wakes up with a new appreciation for everything they once took for granted. They do not wait to say what needs to be said. They do not delay taking action on what they know must be done. They do not assume there will always be another chance. They see life as a gift, not as an obligation. They understand that every single day is a borrowed moment, and because of that, they use it wisely. This shift in thinking transforms existence. Stress is reduced because what once seemed overwhelming is now seen as insignificant. Anger is lessened because conflicts are recognized as fleeting. Complaints fade because the simple privilege of being alive is no longer ignored. This is why embracing mortality is the most powerful tool for eliminating stress. It removes the tendency to cling to the unnecessary. It creates a natural sense of gratitude. It allows for sleep that is deep, unburdened, and free from the weight of unexamined fears. It gives life a depth that cannot be reached through comfort, distraction, or denial. The Stoics understood that life's greatest paradox is that by accepting death fully, one finally learns how to live. This is why they meditated on it before bed. It was not to dwell in darkness, but to ensure that when they woke up, they would live as if it were their last chance to do so. And that is the kind of life that is truly worth living. Accepting mortality before sleep removes the illusion of permanence, but there is another layer of freedom that must follow. It is not enough to acknowledge that life is temporary. It is not enough to recognize that every day could be the last. True peace comes not only from awareness, but from letting go of everything that does not belong to you. Most people suffer not because life is difficult, but because they try to control what was never theirs to control in the first place. Their minds are tangled in other people's actions, past mistakes, future worries, and unresolved conflicts, all of which remain outside their grasp. They carry burdens that were never meant to be theirs, holding on to expectations that reality does not support. The Stoics saw this clearly, which is why they practiced detachment, not as a rejection of life, but as a refusal to be owned by it. The ability to let go before sleep is what determines whether rest will be deep and restorative or shallow and restless. A mind that clings to unresolved thoughts remains active long after the body is shut down. It replays conversations that cannot be changed, revisits moments that have already passed, and creates imaginary versions of the future that do not yet exist. It does not release what is outside its control. It tries to grip it tighter, hoping that worry will somehow fix what is unfixable. This is why so many people wake up feeling exhausted before the day has even begun. Their minds have spent the night wrestling with problems that should have been left behind the moment their heads touched the pillow. The Stoics mastered the art of separating what belongs to them from what does not. They did not resist reality. They did not argue with the way things were. They identified what was within their power and directed their energy toward it, refusing to waste time on anything that existed beyond their reach. This is the foundation of the detachment drill, a nightly practice designed to filter out everything that does not require further thought, so that the mind can enter sleep without the weight of unnecessary stress. Letting go is often misunderstood. Many believe it means not caring, when in reality it is the highest form of self-discipline. It is choosing not to suffer over things that cannot be changed. It is deciding that emotional energy will not be spent on illusions, on hypotheticals, on things that belong to the past or the future, but have no relevance to the present moment. The Stoics were not indifferent to life. They were deeply engaged with it. But they refused to be emotionally controlled by anything that was not within their direct influence. The first step to this practice is the recognition of what is and is not within control. This is the principle upon which all Stoic wisdom rests. A person who has not mastered this distinction will remain a slave to circumstances, reacting to life instead of directing their own state of mind. They will feel peace only when life is easy and stress when it is not. Their emotions will be dictated by external conditions, shifting with every change in fortune. But a person who has trained themselves to see the boundary between what they can and cannot change becomes unshakable. Each night before sleep, the mind must be filtered. Thoughts must be examined, not indulged. If something is troubling, it must be placed into one of two categories: within control or outside of it. If it is within control, then action can be planned. If it is outside control, then attachment to it is wasted effort. The mind must be trained to let go of what does not belong to it. This is not a passive process. It is an active mental exercise, a discipline that strengthens with practice. Releasing unresolved conflicts is part of this process. Many people go to bed with emotional residue from the day still weighing on them. They replay arguments, misunderstandings, and moments of frustration, as if thinking about them longer will somehow undo them. But this is an illusion. The past is untouchable. No amount of thought will change what has already happened. If something can be addressed tomorrow, then a plan should be made to handle it then. If nothing can be done, then further reflection is pointless. The Stoics trained themselves to let go of anything that did not require immediate action. They understood that rumination is not resolution. Thinking about a problem repeatedly does not solve it. It only strengthens its hold on the mind. The ability to detach before sleep is also a form of mental hygiene. Just as the body is cleansed before bed, the mind must also be cleared. Most people carry emotional and psychological clutter without realizing it. They don't recognize how much weight they are holding until it exhausts them. Their minds are full of unresolved concerns, lingering doubts, and unnecessary attachments, all of which prevent true rest. The Stoics understood that rest is not just the absence of activity, it is the absence of unnecessary burden. A person who has not trained themselves to mentally release stress will never know what real relaxation feels like. They may fall asleep, but they will not experience the full depth of what sleep is meant to provide. Emotional detachment is not coldness. It is not apathy. It is the ability to feel fully while remaining unshaken by external events. It is engaging with life completely while refusing to be controlled by anything beyond personal influence. It is not about avoiding emotions, but about directing them wisely. A person who reacts to every problem with deep emotional investment burns themselves out quickly. They deplete their energy on things that do not require their attention. They hold on to pain longer than necessary. They replay moments that should be left behind. This is wasted effort. The Stoics knew that emotions, like thoughts, must be filtered. What is useful should be kept. What is not should be released. To build resilience, this practice must be done daily. Letting go is not something that happens once. It is a discipline, a habit, a muscle that must be strengthened through repetition. The more frequently the mind is trained to release what does not serve it, the more naturally this detachment occurs. It becomes second nature. A person who once struggled with anxiety over things outside their control now finds they no longer react the same way. What once felt unbearable now seems small. What once caused distress now barely registers. This is the natural result of mental conditioning. This practice also affects the way a person wakes up. If sleep is entered with unresolved tension, that tension will be carried into the next day. The first thoughts upon waking will be the same thoughts that lingered before sleep. But If the mind has been cleared, freed, and detached, then the next morning is entered with a sense of lightness, not burden. The energy that would have been spent carrying old stress is now available for clarity, purpose, and focus. The deeper benefit of this practice is that it rewires the brain's response to stress. A person who has repeatedly trained themselves to let go before sleep does not only experience relief at night, they begin to carry this skill into the rest of their life. They start reacting differently to challenges because they no longer believe that everything must be held onto. They begin moving through life with an ease that others do not understand. They do not cling. They do not grip what does not belong to them. They do not allow their peace to be dictated by things outside their control. This is how the Stoics lived. They engaged fully with life while remaining separate from the illusions that cause unnecessary suffering. They felt deeply but were not ruled by their emotions. They experienced difficulty but were not consumed by it. They faced adversity but never collapsed under its weight. Because they had trained their minds to let go before sleep, they woke up stronger, calmer, and unshaken. A person who masters this drill does not live in reaction. They live in deliberate control of their own emotional state. They move through each day knowing that nothing is truly theirs except their own mind. And because of that, they are free in a way that most will never be. Letting go before sleep clears the mind, but what follows next is just as important. The way a person wakes up determines the quality of their entire day. A mind that was trained to detach before bed is not weighed down by yesterday, but without the right direction in the morning, it will drift back into old habits. The Stoics understood that waking up is not just about getting out of bed. It is about choosing how to engage with life from the very first moment of the day. The difference between a person who dreads the morning and a person who meets it with strength is not found in their circumstances, but in their first thoughts, their first actions, and the level of purpose they bring to each morning. Most people wake up by accident. They do not rise with intention, but with resistance. Their first thoughts are filled with reluctance, hesitation, or the immediate weight of obligations. They reach for distractions before they have even fully opened their eyes. They move mechanically, following routines out of habit, not purpose. This is why so many struggle with motivation, because they have not trained themselves to direct their first waking thoughts toward meaning. The way the day begins dictates its entire trajectory. The person who starts their morning deliberately with clarity and resolve has already won half the battle. The Stoics did not leave this to chance. They designed their mornings with precision, understanding that the first moments of the day determine its overall quality. They saw each morning as an opportunity to reorient the mind, to set the foundation for the choices, emotions, and reactions that would follow. This is why Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, practiced a morning meditation that reminded him of his duty, his purpose, and the mindset required to navigate the day with strength. Most people assume that happiness is something that comes later, after goals have been achieved, after external conditions improve, after life has granted them the right circumstances. But the Stoics saw happiness differently. It was not something to be found, but something to be practiced. And the most effective way to practice it was to begin the day with a deliberate sense of purpose. The first task in waking up with purpose is understanding that the day is not owed, but given. There is no guarantee of another morning. To open one's eyes is already a gift. The person who understands this wakes up differently. They do not delay gratitude. They do not start the day in frustration. They do not treat the morning as something to be endured, but as something to be used. Every day that begins is another chance to live with meaning, to move forward, to refine the mind, to strengthen the body, to make progress in what matters most. A mind that is trained to see the morning as an opportunity instead of an obligation does not struggle with motivation. It does not resist waking up. It does not waste time searching for reasons to start. It already understands that to be alive is reason enough. This is why a sense of duty eliminates morning anxiety. A person who wakes up without clear direction wastes time deciding what to do, hesitating, overthinking, or waiting for motivation to arrive. But the Stoics removed this uncertainty. They began the day knowing exactly what needed to be done, and because of that, they did not feel the weight of hesitation. Duty is often misunderstood. Many assume it is about obligation, about doing what must be done regardless of personal desire. But the Stoics saw duty as something far deeper and more fulfilling. It was not about external requirements, but about inner alignment. It was the recognition that there is work to be done, and to do it is to live fully. Marcus Aurelius, upon waking, reminded himself that he did not exist to lie in bed, to seek comfort, or to avoid challenge. He existed to engage with life, to contribute, to strengthen himself, and to serve the world in whatever way he could. This perspective dissolves the mental resistance that makes mornings difficult. A person who wakes up with a reason greater than themselves does not hesitate to get out of bed. They do not hit snooze because they understand that time is not unlimited. They do not complain about the difficulty of waking up because they recognize that having another day to wake up at all is a privilege. Marcus Aurelius's morning meditation was not about personal indulgence, comfort, or seeking happiness directly. It was about setting the mind into the correct state for engaging with the day ahead. He would reflect on the nature of the world, the role of people within it, the responsibilities he carried, and the kind of attitude required to meet those responsibilities with strength and clarity. He reminded himself that challenges would come, that people would be ungrateful, that obstacles would appear, but that none of these things could disturb his peace unless he allowed them to. This simple practice created an unbreakable foundation for the day. Before stepping out of bed, his mind was already fortified against frustration, impatience, and distraction. He did not enter the day with fragility, hoping things would go smoothly. He entered the day prepared for whatever it brought. A person who follows this practice does not wake up aimlessly. They wake up with clarity. They do not drift into distractions. They direct themselves toward what is essential. Their first thoughts are not complaints or reluctance, but commitment and focus. They begin the day by strengthening their perspective, and because of that, they move through the day with a mind that is already disciplined, already grateful, already engaged. This is why the first moments of wakefulness must be protected. Most people sabotage their mornings immediately by reaching for distractions. They check their phones before they have even risen. They flood their minds with news, social media, or emails, allowing external influences to dictate their emotions before they have even taken control of their own mental state. The Stoics would have seen this as a complete waste of the most valuable moments of the day. They knew that the first focus of the mind must be carefully chosen because it sets the tone for everything that follows. This is why a simple morning routine is essential. It is not about doing what is trendy or complicated. It is about ensuring that the mind is set in the right direction before anything else interferes. It does not need to be long. It does not need to be rigid. It only needs to be intentional. A person who begins the morning with a moment of stillness, reflection, or gratitude begins the day with stability. They do not rush into obligations before their mind is centered. They do not allow external pressures to shape their emotions before they have first chosen their own attitude. This simple act, pausing before engaging with the world, deciding on the mental state with which to meet the day, and setting a clear purpose, creates an entirely different experience of life. The Stoics understood that happiness is not found in external events, but in internal discipline. The person who has trained themselves to wake up with purpose does not wait for happiness to appear. They cultivate it, they create it through their perspective, their choices, and their refusal to waste the morning in idleness or distraction. A person who wakes up without purpose feels the weight of the day pressing down on them. But a person who wakes up knowing exactly why they must rise, what they must do, and how they must approach the day does not struggle with motivation. They do not fear challenges because they have already prepared for them. They do not waste time because they have already decided how their time will be used. They do not wish the morning were easier because they have trained themselves to embrace difficulty as part of life. This is why waking up with purpose is the key to starting the day with happiness. It is not about waiting for external circumstances to be perfect. It is about choosing to meet each day with clarity, with commitment, and with a mind that has already decided how it will think, act, and respond. A person who lives this way does not wake up as a passive participant in their own life. They wake up as someone who is ready to engage with life fully, without hesitation, without reluctance, and without fear. Starting the day with purpose shapes the mind, but sustaining that purpose requires something deeper, the mastery of stillness. A person who moves through life with focus and drive, but never understands how to pause strategically, will eventually find their strength depleting. The Stoics understood that momentum alone does not create excellence. Constant action without balance leads to exhaustion, and exhaustion leads to weakness. Strength is not just found in effort, but in knowing when to step back, when to regain clarity, when to restore the mind and body. Those who fear rest, believing it is a form of stagnation, fail to see that stillness is not the absence of progress. It's what makes progress sustainable. The modern world glorifies action. People are conditioned to believe that productivity is the highest virtue, that success is measured by how much is accomplished, that to slow down is to fall behind. But this mindset is built on a misunderstanding. The greatest warriors do not swing their swords without rest. The sharpest minds do not race without pause. The strongest individuals do not push endlessly until they collapse. Rest is not weakness. It is a tool, a weapon, a necessary part of mastery. Those who do not respect it burn out before they reach their true potential. The Stoics did not view rest as indulgence. They saw it as an active decision, a process that had to be done with purpose. They knew that there is a difference between passive idleness and intentional stillness. Passive idleness is what happens when a person falls into distraction, when time is wasted in empty pursuits, when the mind is consumed by triviality. This kind of rest is not restorative. It is an escape, a way to avoid discomfort, a form of procrastination disguised as relaxation. It does not renew energy, it drains it further. Intentional stillness, however, is entirely different. It is a deliberate act of withdrawal, not to avoid life, but to engage with it more deeply. It is a moment where the mind is recalibrated, where clarity is strengthened, where excess noise is filtered out. The Stoics practiced this in many ways, through solitude, through meditation, through journaling, through controlled periods of disengagement from the external world. They knew that those who never step back to examine their own thoughts become prisoners of them. They understood that without stillness, the mind is never truly their own. Seneca, one of the most well-regarded Stoic philosophers, spoke often about the necessity of balancing action with calm. He warned against the trap of relentless busyness, knowing that many people mistake constant movement for true progress. He observed that most individuals fill their days with activity, not because they are achieving anything meaningful, but because they are afraid of what will happen if they stop. They run from silence because silence forces them to confront themselves. They fill every gap in their schedule because an empty moment feels uncomfortable. They confuse exhaustion with accomplishment, not realizing that a mind that is always occupied is a mind that is never in control. A person who never learns to embrace stillness is a person who never fully understands their own thoughts. They do not pause long enough to reflect on their direction, to question their choices, to listen to the deeper signals of their own intuition. They move without thinking, and in doing so, they move in circles. The Stoics refused to live this way. They structured their days not just around effort, but around purposeful disengagement, ensuring that when they did act, their actions were precise, intentional, and undiluted by mental exhaustion. The difference between passive sleep and purposeful restoration is found in how the mind enters rest. A person who collapses into rest from sheer exhaustion is not truly resting. Their body may be still, but their mind is scattered, filled with unresolved tensions, unfinished thoughts, and the accumulated weight of unchecked stress. This is why so many wake up feeling just as tired as when they went to bed. They did not rest with intention. They simply shut down from overuse. Their bodies recovered slightly, but their minds remained tangled in the chaos they never took the time to unwind. Purposeful restoration, in contrast, is a skill. It is not just the absence of work. It is an active process of recalibration. The Stoics would enter rest the same way they approached everything else, with clarity, with structure, with a defined purpose. They would set aside distractions, remove unnecessary mental clutter, and give themselves fully to the moment of stillness, whether it was in the form of meditation, reflection, or physical rest. They knew that true rest is not about escaping from responsibility, but about strengthening the mind so that responsibility can be handled with greater wisdom and efficiency. A person who masters this practice doesn't feel guilty for resting. They do not see it as wasted time. They understand that a well-rested mind is sharper, a well-rested body is stronger, and a well-rested person is far more effective than someone who has pushed themselves to the edge of exhaustion. They do not glorify burnout. They do not measure their worth by how depleted they feel at the end of the day. They understand that real strength comes not from doing more, but from doing what matters most, with full presence and focus. This is why stillness was not just a luxury for the Stoics. It was a necessary component of mastery. They saw that without strategic pauses, even the strongest mind would eventually become clouded. Even the most disciplined individual would lose precision. They treated their energy the way a great general treats an army, not something to be thrown into battle recklessly, but something to be managed wisely, deployed at the right times, and preserved when necessary. In modern life, rest is often misunderstood. Many people either avoid it completely, believing it is unnecessary, or indulge in it too passively, using it as an excuse for inaction. The Stoics avoided both extremes. They did not advocate for constant activity, but they also did not believe in aimless idleness. Their approach was measured, deliberate, and deeply aware of the connection between rest and effectiveness. For those who struggle with the idea of stillness, The solution is not to force long periods of inactivity, but to learn how to engage with rest in a way that strengthens the mind instead of weakening it. This means choosing solitude over distraction, reflection over mindless entertainment, presence over passive indulgence. It means recognizing that pausing does not mean losing progress. It means ensuring that progress continues in the right direction. A person who has mastered this approach to rest feels no anxiety when they step back from action. They do not fear that they are falling behind. They do not rush mindlessly into more work just to feel productive. They know that when they do act, their actions will be clear, deliberate, and unstoppable. They do not react impulsively because they have trained themselves to move with intention, not urgency. This is what makes stillness a weapon. It is not passive. It is a tool for sharpening the mind, preserving energy, and ensuring that when movement does happen, it is powerful and effective. Those who ignore this tool become victims of their own exhaustion, operating at half their potential because they have never learned how to reset. Those who wield it wisely move through life with an advantage that others will never understand. They do not burn out. They do not react emotionally. They do not feel controlled by external chaos. They operate from a place of calm, focus, and deep internal strength. The true lesson of Stoicism is not just about enduring hardship. It is about moving through life with intelligence, conserving strength for when it matters most, and never mistaking exhaustion for progress. The ability to pause is the ability to remain in control, to ensure that every action is backed by full awareness, and to cultivate a mind that is not just busy, but disciplined, measured, and ready for whatever comes next. A person who learns this lesson does not wake up scattered. They wake up prepared. They do not end the day in mindless exhaustion. They end it with clarity. They do not waste their energy chasing urgency. They direct it toward what is essential. And because of that, they move through life with a steadiness and power that nothing can shake. Stillness sharpens the mind, but what follows determines whether that clarity is carried into sleep or lost in the noise of unresolved thoughts. The ability to rest is not just about the body. It is about whether the mind is left free or tangled in burdens that should have been set down. Many people enter sleep physically exhausted, but mentally overactive, unable to separate themselves from the events of the day. They close their eyes, but their thoughts do not quiet. Their bodies rest, but their emotions remain engaged, replaying conversations, regrets, or uncertainties that keep them trapped in cycles of stress. The Stoics understood that this was not simply a bad habit, but a failure of discipline. A person who carries the weight of the day into the night has not trained their mind to release unnecessary burdens. They have not practiced emotional equanimity, the ability to acknowledge events without becoming enslaved by them. Overthinking for the Stoics was a sign of mental weakness, not intelligence. It was the mind's way of compensating for a lack of control. When the mind is untrained, it spirals into analysis, reliving situations that no longer require attention, clinging to worries as if they have value. But a mind that has been disciplined into clarity does not waste time chasing what is outside its influence. It closes the day, ends its involvement, and prepares itself for the next, with no residue of unfinished emotions. This ability to close the mind at night is not avoidance. It is a skill. It requires recognizing that thoughts should be chosen, not indulged. Most people do not realize that they allow their minds to run unchecked, feeding into the illusion that more thinking will lead to more solutions. But in reality, most late-night thinking is not problem-solving, but self-torture. It is dwelling on things that no longer require thought, repeating patterns of worry, creating imaginary scenarios that do not exist. The Stoics saw this clearly and refused to allow their minds to become a source of unnecessary suffering. Emotional equanimity means maintaining mental sovereignty. It means not letting external events dictate inner peace. It means practicing the art of detachment from what no longer serves the present moment. A person who has trained themselves in this discipline does not fall into the trap of rumination. They do not let emotions extend beyond their usefulness. They experience them fully in the moment, but when the moment has passed, they let them go. They do not hold on to anger after an argument, carry frustration beyond the problem, or allow fear to exist without purpose. They do not make themselves miserable by dragging yesterday's struggles into today's rest. The key to developing this skill lies in understanding that not all thoughts are worthy of attention. The untrained mind treats every thought as important. It reacts to each worry, amplifies each doubt, entertains each insecurity. But the disciplined mind filters what enters its awareness. It questions each thought before engaging with it. It asks, does this serve me? Is this within my control? Is this adding value to my life? If the answer is no, the thought is discarded without further engagement. This is not suppression, it is selection. Just as a person does not consume everything placed in front of them, the mind should not consume every thought that arises. The Stoics mastered the art of emotional closure. They did not go to sleep with open mental loops, unresolved frustrations, or lingering tension. They understood that a day well lived is a day that does not need to be carried into the next. Before bed, they would review what happened, extract the lesson, and then detach from the experience. If something was within their control, they would make a plan for the next day. If it was outside their control, they would consciously release it. This practice was not just about clearing the mind, but about training it to let go of what was unnecessary. One of the most powerful methods for this is transforming worry into wisdom. Instead of allowing concerns to repeat endlessly, the Stoics would convert them into something useful. If a situation had gone wrong, they did not dwell in regret. They extracted the lesson. If something had been difficult, they did not dwell in frustration. They examined how it had made them stronger. If they had faced failure, they did not attach their identity to it. They studied it, learned from it, and moved forward. This is what made their minds resilient instead of reactive. They did not just try to stop worrying. They redirected worry into something constructive. Many people struggle with this because they assume that letting go means ignoring reality. But the Stoics understood that acceptance is not passivity, it is clarity. To let go does not mean to forget or to pretend something did not happen. It means to engage with it only to the extent that it serves growth and wisdom. If a thought does not lead to a solution, it is unnecessary. If an emotion is being felt for no purpose other than repeating pain, it must be released. The ability to do this requires constant self-examination. It requires asking, what is my mind holding on to right now that is not helping me? Why am I choosing to keep this thought alive? What do I gain from feeding this emotion? This process does not happen overnight. Emotional equanimity is not something a person decides on once and suddenly achieves. It is a daily discipline, something that must be practiced until it becomes natural. The more often the mind is trained to let go, the easier it becomes. At first, the process requires effort, but over time, detachment becomes second nature. A person who has trained themselves to end the day with mental closure does not carry emotional baggage into sleep. They enter rest free from the burdens of the past. They wake up without a lingering weight on their mind, without old frustrations shaping their mood, without unresolved stress clouding their thoughts. They wake up clear, focused, and ready for the day ahead. Many think that emotions are something that happen to them, that they are at the mercy of whatever they feel. But the Stoics knew that emotions are not forces of nature. They are choices. They are reactions that can be shaped, directed, and controlled. A person who has mastered this does not fall into emotional spirals. They do not feel controlled by their worries. They do not struggle with sleepless nights consumed by overthinking. They decide which thoughts deserve their attention and which do not. They move through life with a steady mind because they have trained themselves not to be pulled in every direction by unnecessary emotion. This is why training the mind for emotional equanimity is one of the most important skills a person can develop. It is not about avoiding difficulties, but about ensuring that those difficulties do not own the mind beyond their necessary moment. It is about knowing how to set down emotional weight when it is no longer useful. It is about moving through life with a mind that is light, clear, and unburdened by anything that does not serve growth. A person who develops this skill no longer experiences the same level of stress. They no longer waste energy on what cannot be changed. They no longer give their peace away to things that are outside their influence. They no longer let a single difficult moment ruin an entire night's rest. This is not an easy discipline, but it is one that transforms life entirely. The person who masters this wakes up each day without emotional residue from the past weighing them down. They wake up mentally fresh, prepared to engage with life fully, without hesitation, without regret, and without the burden of unnecessary suffering. Emotional equanimity brings clarity, but without control over thought itself, the mind remains vulnerable to one of the greatest sources of self-inflicted suffering, overthinking. Many people struggle to fall asleep, not because their bodies are restless, but because their minds refuse to quiet down. The thoughts that should have been set aside continue to spin, repeating the same concerns, replaying old conversations, forecasting problems that have not yet arrived. This cycle of mental clutter is not a sign of intelligence. It is not deep thinking. It is a failure to discipline the mind. The Stoics did not allow themselves to be ruled by thought. They understood that a mind left unchecked would drift toward unnecessary suffering, that mental energy wasted on excess contemplation would drain the strength needed for real action. Overthinking is not reflection. It is indulgence in useless worry. A mind that has not been trained to filter its own thoughts becomes a prisoner of endless internal noise, unable to distinguish between what is useful and what is merely an emotional reaction disguised as logic. The ability to shut down unnecessary thoughts is not about suppressing emotions or avoiding problems. It is about learning how to engage with thought deliberately instead of being consumed by it. A person who has mastered this does not get trapped in loops of anxiety, does not lie awake running through countless scenarios, does not let the same concerns repeat endlessly without resolution. They have trained their minds to filter what deserves attention and discard what does not. One of the most effective ways the Stoics accomplished this was by simplifying mental engagement. When faced with a flood of thoughts, they did not entertain every possibility. They did not allow their minds to expand endlessly into different directions, weighing every possibility until exhaustion. Instead, they trained themselves to ask one decisive question that would immediately clarify the situation. This question was always aimed at separating the necessary from the unnecessary, the real from the imagined, the useful from the distracting. It was a tool to cut through mental fog, to stop overthinking in its tracks before it could take hold. The exact form of the question varied, but its purpose was always the same: to silence doubt and bring immediate clarity. The power of this method lies in its simplicity. Most people overthink because they believe that more thought leads to better solutions. But in reality, most problems are not solved by more thinking, but by clearer thinking. The Stoics knew that clarity is not found in excess thought, but in reducing thought to what is essential. Instead of spiraling into endless considerations, they would ask one defining question that forced the mind to choose its next step. This technique eliminates the habit of mentally circling the same concerns without progress. It stops the mind from expanding problems beyond their actual size, prevents unnecessary worry from turning into full-blown anxiety, and redirects energy toward what is within control. A person who practices this regularly rewires their mental habits, no longer reacting emotionally to every thought, no longer feeding into the illusion that constant contemplation leads to peace. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic teachers, understood this deeply. He saw that most human suffering comes not from actual events, but from the thoughts people attach to those events. A problem itself is rarely the cause of distress. It is the interpretation of the problem, the imagined consequences, the exaggerations and fears that accompany it. He taught that the key to avoiding mental spirals is to recognize when the mind is feeding itself unnecessary distress. The mind must be trained to identify when thought is productive and when it is destructive. Overthinking rarely brings solutions. It brings exhaustion. It creates false problems that did not exist before they were analyzed to death. It distorts reality by focusing only on what could go wrong, what was said incorrectly, what may happen in some uncertain future. This habit does not create wisdom. It creates suffering. The Stoics saw that a mind left untrained in thought control becomes its own worst enemy. Instead of using thought as a tool, it becomes trapped within it, unable to break free from its own cycles of doubt and analysis. This is why they place such strong emphasis on knowing when to stop thinking, knowing when a decision had been made, knowing when further contemplation was no longer useful. A person who has mastered this does not lie awake at night battling their own mind. They do not allow their thoughts to dictate their emotions. They decide which thoughts are given attention and which are dismissed without further engagement. They are not controlled by worry, not pulled into hypothetical scenarios, not emotionally disturbed by mental clutter. The ability to detach from excessive thought is a form of freedom. It is what allows a person to move through life without being weighed down by their own unnecessary concerns. It ensures that energy is directed only toward what matters, that stress is not self-imposed, that the mind remains sharp and focused instead of clouded by pointless reflection. This discipline is not developed overnight. It is something that must be practiced repeatedly until it becomes natural. The first step is recognizing when overthinking is occurring. Most people do not even realize they are engaging in it. Their thoughts feel important, their worries feel justified, their concerns seem real. But a trained mind catches overthinking early. It sees when thought is beginning to spiral and stops it before it gains momentum. The second step is cutting through the noise with clarity. This is where the one-question technique becomes invaluable. Instead of letting the mind continue unchecked, the person stops and asks, "Does this require more thought, or am I just feeding a mental loop?" This single question is often enough to break the cycle. If the answer is no, the thought is discarded immediately. If the answer is yes, a clear action must follow. The thought must lead somewhere tangible, either a plan, a resolution, or a conscious decision to leave it alone. The third step is redirecting mental energy towards something more constructive. Overthinking is often a symptom of mental passivity. A person who allows their thoughts to take control is not actively directing their own mind. This is why the Stoics emphasized engaging in activities that reinforce control, writing down thoughts to process them logically, engaging in physical movement to break mental loops, or focusing on something external that requires full attention. A person who follows this process does not fall into the same patterns of worry each night. They do not let their minds become breeding grounds for unnecessary anxiety. They train themselves to engage with thought only when it serves them, not when it pulls them into endless doubt and speculation. This is why conquering overthinking is not just about stopping bad habits. It is about reclaiming control over the mind itself. A person who masters this skill no longer wastes time carrying the same worries from one night to the next. They do not live in the past, do not stress over the future, do not spend their nights locked in mental loops that prevent true rest. They own their thoughts instead of being owned by them. This shift changes everything. The difference between a person who overthinks and a person who does not is not found in their circumstances, but in their relationship with their own mind. One is ruled by thought. The other chooses their thoughts deliberately. One is trapped in worry. The other lives with clarity and focus. A person who eliminates overthinking sleeps deeply. Their mind is quiet because they have trained it to release unnecessary burdens. They do not seek peace through more thinking. They find it in thinking only when it is necessary. This is the path to mental freedom. This is the path to a life that is not controlled by doubt, but directed by clarity, purpose, and deep inner calm. A mind that has conquered overthinking is free, but there is another force that can quietly take its place: expectation. Even after releasing unnecessary thoughts, many still struggle to find peace before sleep because they are mentally gripping the future, attaching themselves to how they believe things should unfold. This subtle attachment is the root of anxiety, frustration, and disappointment. The Stoics saw this clearly. They understood that expectations are self-imposed chains, binding the mind to outcomes that are never fully in one's control. The tighter the grip, the more suffering it brings. Most people go to bed with an invisible contract written in their minds. They assume things will go as planned. They expect others to behave a certain way. They believe tomorrow must unfold in a way that meets their preferences. This silent demand on life is the source of much distress. When the world inevitably acts according to its own nature rather than personal wishes, disappointment follows. The person who has not trained themselves in detachment will feel wronged, unsettled, or even resentful, not because life has been cruel, but because they expected something that was never promised. The Stoics refused to live with such unnecessary burdens. They approached life without entitlement, without assuming that anything owed them an easy path. They knew that detachment from expectation is not pessimism. It is liberation. A person who expects nothing cannot be shaken by disappointment. They cannot be disturbed by unforeseen events. They cannot be harmed by the natural flow of life because they have already accepted whatever comes before it arrives. This ability to let go before the future happens is a skill that transforms how a person sleeps. A mind that expects nothing does not lie awake replaying potential scenarios. It does not waste energy preparing for the future to conform to its will. It does not carry an emotional contract into tomorrow. It rests because it has already surrendered. It has already made peace with uncertainty. It has already chosen to flow with life rather than resist it. This kind of detachment does not mean passivity or a lack of care. The Stoics were not indifferent to outcomes. They simply understood that attachment to them was futile. A person can strive, work, and prepare, but once effort has been applied, the rest is no longer theirs to control. They let go not out of laziness, but out of wisdom. They trained themselves to separate what was in their hands from what was not, and in doing so, they removed the source of much unnecessary suffering. Training the mind to accept any outcome before sleep is a process that must be practiced consistently. Most people fall into anxiety because they believe acceptance comes after events have occurred. They wait to see how things unfold before deciding how to feel about them. This reactionary way of living is why so many struggle with emotional turmoil. They remain mentally tied to results, unable to rest until life has played out according to their terms. The Stoic approach is the opposite. They decided in advance that no matter what happens, they will not be disturbed. They did not wait to see if things went well before allowing themselves peace. They cultivated an unshakable mindset that remained the same whether events were favorable or not. This gave them a deep advantage over those who were always at the mercy of changing circumstances. Their peace did not fluctuate. Their emotions were not dictated by the external world. They carried the same stillness whether success or failure greeted them. A person who sleeps with this mindset does not experience the usual tension before bed. There is no feeling of unfinished business. There is no mental clinging to what must happen next. They have already given their best, and they have already made peace with whatever comes next. They do not waste energy on trying to force what is beyond them. This creates a different kind of rest, one that is deep, undisturbed, and free from the invisible pressure of expectation. This practice requires challenging the habitual tendency to expect things to be a certain way. Most people do this unconsciously. They assume their plans will unfold without disruption. They expect conversations to go smoothly. They hope for a specific outcome and attach their emotions to whether it happens or not. This is a dangerous way to live because it places one's inner state in the hands of external events. The Stoics trained themselves to remove this illusion by seeing the world as it is, not as they wished it to be. The strongest minds do not fight reality. They align themselves with it. They understand that acceptance is not weakness. It is supreme strength. It is the ability to say, "Whatever comes, I am prepared. Whatever changes, I remain steady. Whatever tomorrow brings, it does not own my peace." This kind of detachment does not eliminate effort or drive. It removes the unnecessary suffering that comes from attachment. The person who internalizes this does not start the day in emotional chaos. They do not wake up stressed over things that have not yet happened. They do not waste the morning trying to predict or control events that are already unfolding beyond them. They step into the day ready for anything, expecting nothing, and therefore disturbed by nothing. This is not indifference. It is the highest form of mental discipline. It is the realization that true peace is not found in securing perfect outcomes, but in releasing the need for them. The one who masters this sleeps differently. Their nights are not stolen by fear of the unknown. Their energy is not drained by mental negotiations with reality. Their happiness is no longer tied to whether the world meets their expectations or not. Most suffering comes from trying to control what is not in one's control. A person who has not trained themselves in detachment feels every shift in life as if it is a personal attack. They believe things must go a certain way for them to be at peace. They demand that the universe conforms to their wishes, and when it does not, they struggle, they react, they resist. They waste energy fighting something that was never theirs to dictate. The Stoics removed this unnecessary pain by eliminating the belief that life must be a certain way for them to be content. They did not bargain with existence. They did not place their happiness in the hands of outcomes. They understood that if peace depends on the external world, it will always be unstable. But if peace is rooted in the unshakable decision to expect nothing and accept all, it cannot be taken away. A person who expects nothing still hopes, still works, still strives, but they do so without attachment. They do not give their happiness to an outcome. They do not tie their peace to what happens next. They do what is within their power, and then they let go. This is what makes them strong. This is what allows them to rest deeply at night and wake up without anxiety. Their mind does not resist what is coming because it has already made peace with all possibilities. This way of thinking is foreign to many because the world conditions people to believe that expectation is natural and necessary. But expectation is a fragile way to live. It places too much emotional weight on things that can never be fully controlled. The one who breaks free from this conditioning discovers something rare, happiness that does not depend on circumstances. This shift changes everything. The person who learns to expect nothing does not waste their life in frustration. They do not live in fear of things not going their way. They do not place their sense of well-being on forces outside of them. They move through life lightly, unattached, and therefore untouchable. Their peace is no longer something that must be earned. It is something that exists simply because they have chosen to no longer bargain with the world for it. This is the power of expecting nothing. It is not emptiness. It is not resignation. It is freedom. It is knowing that happiness is no longer something that can be taken away, because it is no longer something that depends on anything but the clarity of one's own mind. A mind that expects nothing is free from anxiety, but there is still one mistake that can quietly drain a person's strength: treating rest as optional. Many see sleep as something passive, something taken when convenient, something that exists outside the realm of discipline. This is why so many suffer from exhaustion. They fail to recognize that rest is not a luxury, it is a responsibility. The Stoics never viewed sleep as mere relaxation. They saw it as an essential part of building resilience, sharpening the mind, and preparing for life's challenges. To neglect rest is not just to neglect comfort, but to weaken the ability to live well. A person who treats sleep as indulgence is a person who has not yet understood its purpose. They see it as something to squeeze in between obligations, something that can be sacrificed in the name of ambition, something that can be delayed when distractions feel more urgent. This mindset is the root of burnout. It is the reason why people move through life drained, sluggish, unable to think clearly, unable to respond to challenges with strength. They fail not because they lack effort, but because they have depleted themselves before effort even begins. The Stoics did not allow themselves to live in such a reckless manner. They approached sleep with the same discipline, intentionality, and respect for order as they did every other aspect of life. They did not see rest as separate from strength. They saw it as a tool that fortified the mind, an essential process that made rational thought possible, a form of preparation that ensured resilience in all situations. Those who ignore this truth believe they are working harder by sacrificing sleep, but in reality, they are weakening the very thing that allows them to work effectively. A soldier who never sharpens his sword will one day find himself defenseless. A mind that is never allowed to rest will one day find itself incapable of focus, clarity, or sound decision-making. The discipline of rest is not about seeking comfort. It is about ensuring that when action is required, the body and mind are both prepared to face it fully. The unprepared mind hesitates. The prepared mind moves without doubt. The difference is found in how well it has been maintained. This understanding changes how sleep is approached. It is no longer something that is taken randomly whenever exhaustion forces it. It becomes something that is guarded, prioritized, and treated with the same seriousness as physical training, intellectual sharpening, and emotional control. It is not an escape from duty. It is a duty itself, a responsibility not just to the self, but to those who depend on clarity, wisdom, and strength in every decision that is made. A person who neglects rest is a person who weakens their own foundation. They try to push forward, but their mind is slow. They try to solve problems, but their thinking is clouded. They try to endure difficulty, but their patience is thin. This is because rest is not just about physical recovery. It is about maintaining mental sharpness, emotional steadiness, and the ability to think clearly in times of crisis. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers and Roman emperors, understood this deeply. Despite ruling over an empire and carrying the weight of leadership, he did not glorify sleeplessness. He did not see exhaustion as a virtue. He knew that a tired mind is a weak mind, and a weak mind makes poor decisions. The Stoic approach to rest is rooted in balance, not indulgence. It is not about sleeping excessively or using rest as an excuse for inaction. It is about recognizing that restoration is necessary for a life of disciplined action, clear thought, and wise judgment. A person who sleeps well does not do so because they are lazy. They do so because they respect their own mind enough to ensure it is always functioning at its highest potential. There is a reason why so many fail to maintain this discipline. They associate rest with laziness. They have been conditioned to believe that working harder means sacrificing sleep, pushing beyond exhaustion, ignoring the body's signals, and treating fatigue as something to be conquered rather than respected. This is a dangerous illusion. It leads not to greatness, but to a slow and inevitable collapse. Those who think they are making progress by depriving themselves of rest do not realize that their progress is inefficient, their decisions are impaired, and their endurance is short-lived. True discipline is not found in mindless effort. It is found in balanced effort, knowing when to push, when to recover, when to engage, and when to step back so that engagement can be stronger the next time. A Stoic who's mastered this discipline does not see sleep as a loss of time. They see it as time well spent in preparing for everything that follows. They do not hesitate to rest when needed, because they understand that energy is a resource to be managed wisely, not wasted recklessly. A person who reframes sleep as a form of discipline rather than indulgence will experience immediate change in their life. They will wake up with a sharper mind, a steadier mood, and a sense of control over their own energy levels. They will no longer drag themselves through the day, constantly trying to compensate for a lack of recovery. They will move with deliberate force, not sluggish resistance. They will think with clarity, not mental fog. They will respond to challenges with strength, not emotional instability. This shift is not just about the physical effects of sleep. It is about the mindset that shapes it. A person who guards their rest as a duty rather than treating it as a casual act carries themselves differently. They know that each day requires them to be at their best, and they do not sabotage their own potential by refusing to take care of their most valuable tool, their mind. The Stoic mindset is not about doing more for the sake of doing more. It is about doing what is essential, with full presence and unwavering focus. A person who lacks sleep cannot achieve this. Their thoughts scatter, their patience thins, their ability to act with wisdom fades. They are not in control of themselves. They are simply reacting to fatigue. Those who respect their own minds will not allow this to happen. They will see sleep not as an escape, but as a necessary act of preparation, a discipline that allows them to function with strength, precision, and full command of their thoughts. They will not allow the modern glorification of exhaustion to trick them into believing that running on empty is a sign of success. They will know that true success is built on clarity, on energy that is preserved and directed wisely, on a mind that has been sharpened rather than dulled by fatigue. This approach changes everything. A person who has mastered it does not dread mornings. They do not wake up in resistance to the day. They do not struggle to find focus, motivation, or presence. They wake up ready because they have done what is necessary to ensure readiness. They do not feel weighed down by the day before because their sleep was not stolen by mental clutter. They do not experience instability because their energy is not in chaos. They have trained themselves to respect the natural cycle of effort and restoration, and because of this, they move through life with efficiency, strength, and absolute clarity. There is no honor in exhaustion. There is no wisdom in running oneself into the ground. The Stoics understood that a mind that is well rested is a mind that can handle anything. They knew that the ability to pause and recover is not a weakness. It is a sign of self-mastery. They did not waste their energy mindlessly. They used it with precision. They did not deplete themselves in the name of appearing hard-working. They ensured that when work was done, it was done well. A person who internalizes this lesson will find themselves operating on a higher level than those who see rest as optional. They will think more clearly, move more decisively, and feel more in control of their emotions. They will not drag themselves through life, constantly compensating for their own self-inflicted exhaustion. They will step into each day fully equipped because they have learned to respect the power of balance. This is the truth that separates those who struggle from those who thrive. The mind must be protected, not just from external distractions, but from the internal self-neglect that comes from ignoring rest. The one who sees sleep as a duty, not an indulgence, will never wake up unprepared. They will never move through life half-present. They will never allow themselves to be ruled by fatigue. They will wake up strong, clear, steady, and because of that, they will always be ready for what comes next. A mind that respects rest as a discipline is a mind that begins to operate with greater precision, clarity, and strength. But knowing that sleep is essential is not enough. Mastering it requires understanding how to create deep, uninterrupted rest. Many believe that simply lying down and closing their eyes is sufficient, but true restoration is far more deliberate. The Stoics approach sleep with the same strategic awareness that they applied to every part of life. They did not see it as a passive process, but as an active practice that required both mental preparation and physical alignment. They understood that the body and mind must be primed for rest, just as they must be primed for action. Modern science now confirms what the Stoics intuitively knew. The way a person prepares for sleep determines its quality. A restless mind cannot simply shut down at will. a body that has been overstimulated throughout the day, does not transition into deep rest without guidance. The nervous system must be signaled that it is time to slow down. The mind must be calmed, not through force, but through intentional cues that guide it into stillness. Those who fail to create this transition will struggle, no matter how much time they allocate to sleep. They may rest for hours, yet wake up feeling fatigued. They may enter bed exhausted, yet find themselves tossing and turning. This is not a failure of sleep itself. It is a failure of preparation. The Stoics mastered this by aligning themselves with natural rhythms, structured habits, and an unshakable internal state. They did not leave rest to chance. They designed their lives in a way that ensured sleep came easily, deeply, and without disturbance. They structured their evenings to decelerate rather than intensify, allowing the mind to let go of unnecessary stimulation before entering rest. They ensured that external conditions supported, rather than interfered with, the body's ability to restore itself. They understood that sleep is not something to be forced, but something to be cultivated through consistency, discipline, and control over one's own physiology. A person who sleeps like a Stoic does not experience the common struggles of modern restlessness. They do not suffer from racing thoughts, sporadic wakefulness, or the feeling of waking up more tired than when they went to bed. Their sleep is structured, disciplined, and aligned with both ancient wisdom and modern scientific understanding. This is not a random occurrence. It is the result of specific habits, mental shifts, and physiological adjustments that make deep, uninterrupted rest a natural state rather than an inconsistent luxury. One of the most critical factors in achieving this is understanding how to reset the nervous system before sleep. The human body is not designed to move from high stimulation to deep rest instantly. It operates on biological rhythms that must be respected. Those who fail to recognize this find themselves constantly battling against their own physiology. They try to sleep while their nervous system is still activated. They attempt to force relaxation while their stress response remains engaged. This is why so many suffer from restless nights. It is not that they lack sleep, but that they have not learned how to transition into it properly. The Stoics were deeply aware of the body's need for rhythm and consistency. They structured their evenings with intention, ensuring that their minds and bodies were not trapped in high-alert states before bed. They understood that what happens before sleep determines the quality of sleep itself. Modern science confirms this. The nervous system must shift from sympathetic activation, the state of alertness, to parasympathetic dominance, the state of relaxation, for sleep to be deep and restorative. Those who fail to make this shift will find themselves waking up frequently, struggling to enter deep sleep stages, or waking up exhausted despite having slept for hours. This is why intentional rituals before bed are non-negotiable. The person who masters sleep does not end their day in chaos. They do not consume stimulating content, engage in high-energy conversations, or allow their mind to race in unresolved thought cycles. They deliberately lower external stimulation, ensuring that the nervous system is not being fed signals of stress, urgency, or overactivity. They recognize that the mind does not operate separately from the body. Whatever state the body is in, the mind will follow. This is also why consistency in sleep cycles is critical. The body thrives on predictability. The mind becomes accustomed to patterns. When sleep times are erratic, when the body does not know when rest will come, the nervous system remains in a state of mild uncertainty. This is why those with inconsistent sleep schedules struggle to feel truly rested. Their bodies do not trust the rhythm of their rest. Their minds do not receive clear signals that allow for deep, uninterrupted recovery. Their systems remain partially alert, even in sleep, because they have not been given the stability required for full release. A disciplined sleep cycle ensures that the brain, body, and nervous system align with natural restoration. This is not a matter of willpower. It is a matter of biology, training, and respect for the systems that govern energy, alertness, and recovery. The person who understands this does not fight sleep. They do not treat it as an enemy, something to be conquered. They work with it, structure their life around it, and allow it to become a powerful tool for strength, resilience, and clarity. The failure to approach sleep in this way is why so many suffer from exhaustion, mental fog, and sluggish performance. They try to function on a depleted system. They rely on stimulants to push through the fatigue that proper rest would have eliminated. They attempt to compensate for their self-imposed imbalance with short-term fixes that do not address the root of their issue. They ignore the very thing that would make their actions sharper, their thinking clearer, and their bodies stronger. The Stoic approach removes this unnecessary suffering by eliminating randomness, inconsistency, and self-inflicted exhaustion. It ensures that sleep becomes a source of strength rather than a source of struggle. It creates a system where recovery is not something that happens occasionally, but something that happens predictably, deeply, and without resistance. A person who has mastered this does not wake up feeling burdened. They do not require excessive amounts of effort to become alert. They wake up already in command of their energy, already steady in their thoughts, already prepared for the demands of the day. Their nights are not battles against restlessness. Their mornings are not battles against fatigue. They have structured their lives in a way that ensures sleep is working for them, rather than against them. This is why those who embrace this discipline experience a completely different reality than those who do not. They do not see rest as separate from performance. They do not treat exhaustion as a normal state. They know that a sharp mind is a rested mind, and a rested mind is one that has been trained to transition into sleep properly. The modern world does not encourage this understanding. It glorifies endless stimulation, high levels of activity, and a mindset that views sleep as secondary. But the person who truly seeks mastery over their mind, their actions, and their ability to operate at the highest level knows that rest is not an afterthought. It is a strategic necessity. This is the difference between those who move through life in a constant state of depletion and those who move through life with unshakable energy, presence, and clarity. The way a person sleeps determines how they think, how they act, how they respond to challenges, and how they endure adversity. It determines whether they function as a reactive, exhausted version of themselves, or as a person who is fully equipped to meet life with complete control. Those who fail to master this will always feel as if they are catching up, as if they are pushing through barriers that should not exist. Those who take control of their rest will always feel as if they are operating with a reserve of strength that others cannot understand. This is the truth that separates those who are merely surviving from those who are fully thriving. Deep, uninterrupted sleep is not an accident. It is not a gift given only to some. It is a skill, a discipline, a structured system that ensures the mind and body are restored, resilient, and unshakable. This is how a person sleeps like a Stoic. This is how they wake up ready for anything. A disciplined approach to sleep creates the foundation for deep rest. But there is one final barrier that often stands in the way: the need for control. A mind that holds tightly to the illusion of control will never fully release itself into rest. Even if the body is still, even if the eyes are closed, even if the environment is quiet, the mind remains tense, scanning for potential problems, resisting uncertainty, refusing to let go. This is why so many struggle to sleep, not because their bodies are unwilling, but because their minds are still trying to solve, fix, plan, or control something beyond their reach. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that control is not something we own. It is something we must be wise enough to discern. They trained themselves to recognize what was within their power and what was not. They knew that fighting reality is the source of endless suffering, that resisting the natural flow of life does not create solutions, but only deepens anxiety. A person who cannot surrender to what they cannot change will always be in conflict with themselves, and that conflict does not disappear at night. It follows them into sleep, turning rest into a battlefield. Letting go of control before sleep is not about giving up. It is not about indifference. It is about choosing peace over resistance, choosing clarity over mental exhaustion, choosing to trust life instead of exhausting oneself, trying to force it. This shift is the key to eliminating stress-related insomnia, to freeing the nervous system from the grip of over-responsibility, to creating a space where sleep can naturally take hold rather than feeling like an impossible task. A person who has not yet learned this will find themselves lying awake, replaying conversations, forecasting potential failures, trying to piece together plans that cannot be finalized in that moment. They will turn over every detail of an issue, convinced that more thought will bring clarity, that more mental effort will bring resolution. But problems are not solved in a state of desperation. A mind that is frantic, that refuses to let go, that is still clinging to control, will never find the peace it is looking for. The irony is that true clarity only arrives when the mind is relaxed enough to receive it. Just as muddy water settles when left undisturbed, the mind finds its best solutions when it stops gripping, forcing, and exhausting itself in an endless loop of control. The more tightly a person tries to control things, the more they suffocate their own ability to think clearly, to respond wisely, to allow space for insight and resolution to emerge naturally. This is why learning to trust life is one of the most powerful mental shifts a person can make. It does not mean abandoning effort. It does not mean allowing life to dictate everything. It means knowing where effort ends and surrender begins. It means recognizing that no amount of worrying, over-planning, or mental resistance will change what is already outside of one's control. It means understanding that peace is not found in controlling life. It is found in mastering one's response to it. The Stoics trained themselves to release attachment to results, to let go of the idea that they could control every outcome, every detail, every possibility. They understood that life unfolds as it does, regardless of personal preferences, and that the wisest thing a person can do is accept this reality instead of fighting it. They saw that the greatest source of suffering is not the events of life, but the refusal to accept them as they are. A person who fights what they cannot change will always be exhausted, and this exhaustion does not fade when the day ends. It carries into the night, robbing them of rest, keeping them locked in unnecessary struggle. A person who has mastered the art of letting go before sleep does not fall into this trap. They do not waste their nights carrying the weight of the world. They do not allow their minds to wrestle with uncertainties that will not be solved in that moment. They do not grip at control that was never theirs to hold in the first place. Instead, they shift their focus. They remind themselves that they have done what they can, and the rest does not belong to them. They train themselves to release the day fully, without regret, without unfinished mental loops, without resistance to the unknown. This ability to release control is not weakness, it is the highest form of strength. A person who can let go is not passive, they are wise. They know that trying to control the uncontrollable does not bring security, it only brings exhaustion. They recognize that trusting life is not about blind faith. It is about choosing to stop wasting energy on battles that cannot be won. They understand that peace is a choice, not a result of perfect circumstances. A person who internalizes this shift experiences a completely different kind of sleep. Their mind is not restless because it has learned to trust that solutions will come in their own time. Their nervous system is not tense because it has been signaled that the fight is over for now. Their thoughts are not racing because they have trained themselves to release the day rather than carry it endlessly forward. This approach transforms the quality of rest. Sleep is no longer a struggle. It is a natural state that arrives easily, deeply, and without resistance. The mind does not need to be forced into sleep when it has already been freed from the chains of control. A person who understands this wakes up refreshed, clear, and fully restored, rather than feeling like they barely escaped their own thoughts long enough to rest. The reason so many struggle with this is because they have been conditioned to believe that control equals safety. They think that if they let go, they will be unprepared, vulnerable, exposed to failure. But the truth is, clinging to control creates more instability than it prevents. It keeps the mind in a state of tension, keeps the body from fully relaxing, keeps sleep from ever reaching the deep restorative state that the nervous system requires. The only way to break this cycle is to rewrite the relationship between control and rest. A person must train themselves to understand that letting go does not mean losing power. It means reclaiming it. It means deciding that peace is no longer something that must be earned through excessive thought, but something that is chosen by refusing to engage in unnecessary struggle. It means remembering that life will unfold as it does, and no amount of worry will change that. This shift does not happen instantly. It must be practiced, reinforced, and made into a habit. Just as the Stoics trained themselves to detach from external circumstances, a person must train themselves to detach from the need to control before sleep. They must remind themselves every night that they have done what they can, and that is enough. They must release the false belief that more mental effort will bring certainty, and instead embrace the reality that certainty is an illusion. A person who makes this a practice transforms the way they sleep, the way they wake up, and the way they engage with life itself. They no longer enter each day exhausted from mentally battling what cannot be changed. They no longer bend their nice gripping at thoughts that do nothing but drain them. They move through life with calm, focus, and clarity because they have learned the ultimate truth. Control was never the key to peace. Letting go was. And in that release, they find the deepest rest, the greatest freedom, and the most powerful state of mind they have ever known. A mind that has learned to let go before sleep awakens with a rare kind of freedom, unburdened, steady, and fully present. But there is another essential piece to mastering rest and effort, one that often goes overlooked in the pursuit of productivity and self-improvement: balance. The ancient Stoics understood that the human experience is not meant to be lived in a state of constant push or endless withdrawal. Neither excess effort nor excessive rest creates true strength. Instead, the ability to move seamlessly between effort and restoration, work and recovery, exertion and renewal, this is the foundation of a powerful, resilient mind. Many believe that discipline means relentless force, a never-ending grind where rest is treated as weakness. Others fall into the opposite trap, seeking ease and comfort, avoiding all struggle and mistaking stagnation for peace. But neither extreme creates a life of wisdom, clarity, or enduring strength. The person who pushes endlessly without pause will soon break. The one who avoids all challenge will never develop the resilience needed to face life's inevitable trials. Only the person who has mastered balance will be able to endure without depletion, to grow without burning out, to act with full force when needed, and retreat with full acceptance when required. The Stoics knew that a well-lived life requires both movement and stillness. They rejected the idea that pushing harder always leads to better results. They saw how overexertion led to exhaustion, how an imbalanced mind became reckless, how a life without structured rest eventually collapses under its own weight. At the same time, they did not fall into laziness, idleness, or indulgence in comfort. They found a path that was neither extreme, one of deliberate, measured action, balanced by intentional, structured rest. The failure to understand this balance is why many people struggle with stress, burnout, and inconsistency. They throw themselves into work with no limits, then crash into exhaustion. They push themselves relentlessly, believing that stopping is a failure, only to find that they have drained themselves of energy, motivation, and clarity. Or they do the opposite, avoiding effort entirely, refusing to challenge themselves, never stretching beyond what is comfortable. Both paths lead to ruin. Both paths deny the reality of what is needed to build lasting strength. The disciplined Stoic does not make these mistakes. They do not see rest as indulgence, nor do they see work as suffering. They align themselves with the natural rhythm of energy and restoration, action and withdrawal, engagement and stillness. They push forward when necessary, but they do not grind themselves into the ground. They pause when required, but they do not allow comfort to make them soft. They walk the middle path, the only path that leads to lasting power. Many struggle with this because they do not see rest as an active practice. They assume that resting is simply doing nothing. But structured rest is not the absence of effort. It is effort directed toward renewal. The Stoics didn't rest aimlessly. They didn't waste time in idleness or meaningless distractions. They used rest as a way to sharpen themselves, to return to a state of clarity, to ensure that when they re-entered effort, they did so with full capacity. This is the difference between mindless exhaustion and strategic discipline. The person who has not trained themselves in balance burns out quickly, never reaching their true potential because they constantly deplete themselves without recovery. The one who has mastered balance understands that effort is only as strong as the ability to recover from it. A mind that is well rested can sustain effort longer, with greater focus, with more stability. A body that is given time to repair will last longer, will be stronger, will not collapse under strain. This approach does not mean avoiding difficulty. It does not mean seeking comfort over growth. It means developing the wisdom to know when to push and when to pause. A warrior does not fight without strategy. They choose their battles, conserve their strength, train for endurance, and ensure that when they do act, they do so with full capacity. The same is true for the disciplined mind. It does not waste itself on meaningless struggle. It does not fight battles that do not need to be fought. It does not drain itself unnecessarily. Instead, it protects its energy, using it wisely, directing it where it matters, ensuring that no effort is wasted and no rest is ignored. This is why overexertion is not a virtue. Many believe that working longer hours, pushing harder, and constantly striving means they are achieving more. But a fatigued mind does not produce excellence. A tired body does not move with precision. A person who never rests does not last. The Stoics understood this long before modern science confirmed it. They saw that a mind in balance is a mind that can operate at its highest potential for the longest period of time. A person who pushes themselves endlessly will eventually make mistakes, not because they lack skill, but because fatigue erodes judgment, dulls focus, and weakens self-control. This is why structured rest is not just a luxury, it is an essential part of a disciplined life. A person who has trained themselves to rest with intention does not experience the highs and lows of inconsistency. They do not cycle between extreme motivation and total burnout. They do not crash after periods of excessive effort. They move through life with steady, unshakable energy because they have trained themselves to replenish what they use. Many avoid rest because they believe it slows them down. But rest is not an obstacle to progress. It is what allows progress to be sustained. The Stoic does not see rest as wasted time. They see it as a tool for sharpening the mind, repairing the body, and strengthening the will. They do not feel guilty for stepping back when needed, because they know that without restoration, every action that follows will be weaker, slower, and less effective. They do not fall into the trap of constant effort with no regard for its consequences. A mind that has been trained in gentle self-discipline does not need external forces to dictate when to stop or when to start. It does not rely on burnout to force rest, nor does it require external motivation to begin work. It moves with precision, deciding when to exert itself fully and when to retreat for recovery. This is what creates long-term endurance, stability, and consistent strength. The person who masters this approach experiences a completely different kind of life. They do not wake up already drained. They do not reach the middle of the day exhausted from overexertion. They do not collapse at night, unable to turn off their mind. They move through each day with clarity, using their energy wisely, ensuring that each action is taken with full capacity rather than partial effort. This is the wisdom that so many overlook. They believe discipline is about force, about pushing harder, about ignoring the body and mind's need for recovery. But the strongest individuals are not those who push endlessly. They are those who push intelligently, who recover deliberately, who know that true strength is found in balance, not extremes. This is why the Stoics lasted. They did not burn out. They did not break. They endured. They knew when to press forward and when to retreat. They knew when to act and when to rest. They knew that a life of mastery is not built on reckless effort, but on a rhythm of exertion and restoration, work and recovery, engagement and withdrawal. A person who follows this path does not experience the common struggles of modern life, the endless fatigue, the chronic stress, the cycles of burnout and collapse. They live with a sense of stability, steadiness, and full command over their own energy. They are not controlled by external demands or internal chaos. They move with certainty because they have trained themselves to be in balance. They know when to push, they know when to rest, and because of this, they never break. A mind that has mastered balance moves through life with clarity, endurance, and purpose. It does not collapse under the weight of exhaustion, nor does it lose itself in idleness. But even the most disciplined mind can suffer if it does not cultivate one essential habit: gratitude. The way a person ends their day determines not just the quality of their sleep, but the quality of their entire existence. A mind that dwells on what is missing, on what went wrong, on what was frustrating will always suffer. A mind that trains itself to see what was good, what was meaningful, what was enough, will always find peace. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that gratitude is not something that happens naturally. It is something that must be cultivated with discipline. The default state of the mind is to focus on what is lacking, to seek what is missing, to dwell on problems instead of appreciating what is present. Left untrained, the mind will always find reasons to be dissatisfied. It will always convince itself that something more is needed before contentment can exist. This is why so many people struggle with fulfillment, why they chase endlessly without ever feeling at peace. They are not lacking external success. They are lacking the ability to recognize what is already there. A person who does not train their mind in gratitude will always live in a state of deficiency, no matter how much they have. They will fall asleep thinking about what they did not accomplish, what they do not have, what they wish was different. They will wake up in the same state of dissatisfaction, carrying that burden into the next day, repeating the cycle endlessly. This is why gratitude is not just a virtue. It is a necessity. It is the single most powerful tool for shifting the mind away from anxiety, frustration, and endless wanting. It is what allows a person to look at their life, no matter how imperfect, and see not what is missing, but what is already meaningful. The practice of daily gratitude reflection is not about forced positivity or pretending that difficulties do not exist. It is about training the mind to see clearly, to recognize that even in hardship there is something of value. Even in struggle, there is something worth appreciating. It is about replacing the habit of dissatisfaction with the habit of acknowledgement, about ensuring that the last thoughts before sleep are not ones of regret, frustration, or longing, but of appreciation, recognition, and acceptance. The Stoics did not wait for gratitude to appear on its own. They made it a deliberate practice. They understood that the mind must be directed toward what is good, just as it must be trained away from what is harmful. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most disciplined minds in history, did not merely reflect on what was wrong with the world. He actively trained himself to find reasons to be grateful, to appreciate even the smallest aspects of life, to recognize that no matter the circumstances, there was always something of worth in each day. This is why reviewing small joys leads to long-term happiness. A person who only acknowledges major victories, grand achievements, or rare moments of success will spend most of their life in dissatisfaction. True fulfillment does not come from rare events. It comes from learning to find meaning in the ordinary, from recognizing that even the smallest things contribute to a life well lived. A warm conversation, a moment of laughter, the comfort of a simple meal, the fact that one is alive to experience another day. These are the things that form the foundation of a contented mind. A person who does not train themselves to recognize these small joys will always overlook them. They will move through life seeking something greater, never appreciating what already exists. They will measure happiness by extreme moments, by major milestones, by things that happen too rarely to be the foundation of a peaceful life. The one who learns to see meaning in the ordinary, who finds gratitude in daily life rather than only in special occasions, will be the one who carries peace wherever they go. This is also why gratitude neutralizes daily frustrations. Life will always present difficulties, but difficulty does not have to define the experience of living. A person who has trained themselves in gratitude does not ignore hardship, but they do not allow it to outweigh what is good. They see that even when things go wrong, there are still things that went right. They recognize that even in struggle, there is something to appreciate. They do not allow a single inconvenience, a single setback, a single frustration to consume the entirety of their perspective. Without this practice, negativity always dominates. The mind will latch onto what is frustrating, what is unsatisfying, what did not go according to plan. A person may have had 99 moments of peace, yet the one moment of frustration will control their thoughts. This is not because life is terrible. It is because the mind has not been trained to balance perspective. The discipline of gratitude ensures that no single frustration, no single failure, no single imperfection ever has the power to define an entire day. It ensures that even when difficulties arise, they do not overshadow what is still valuable, what is still worth appreciating, what is still meaningful. The most effective way to integrate this practice is through a structured, Stoic-inspired method of gratitude reflection. A mind that is not trained in reflection will always drift toward chaos. It will not naturally focus on what is good. It must be directed, guided, disciplined. The Stoics understood that the act of writing down gratitude, of deliberately reflecting on what is worth appreciating, is not just a small habit. It's a way of reshaping the mind itself. A person who engages in daily gratitude journaling does not leave happiness to chance. They create a record of what is meaningful, reinforcing appreciation, strengthening their ability to see life with clarity rather than dissatisfaction. This is not just a theoretical practice. It is a practical tool for rewiring the way the mind processes life. The act of writing forces clarity. It forces recognition, forces acknowledgement, forces the mind to slow down and notice what is often overlooked. It takes gratitude from being an occasional feeling to being a structured part of daily existence. A person who commits to this practice does not live the same way as one who does not. They experience life with a different lens because they have trained themselves to see what others ignore. They do not allow their minds to be controlled by complaints, by comparison, by dissatisfaction. They have built a habit of seeing what is good, and that habit transforms the way they engage with life. This is why those who practice gratitude consistently experience deeper fulfillment than those who do not. They do not allow their peace to be dictated by circumstances. They do not depend on external events to feel appreciation. They have trained their minds to recognize what is already present, to appreciate what already exists, to see meaning in what is already within reach. This shift is what makes all the difference between a life of endless seeking and a life of sustained contentment. Gratitude is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not ignoring reality. It is choosing to focus on what strengthens rather than what drains, choosing to see what is valuable rather than what is lacking, choosing to end each day not with frustration, but with recognition of what was worthwhile. It is what allows a person to sleep with peace rather than regret, to wake up with clarity rather than longing, to move through life with a sense of abundance rather than deficiency. A mind trained in gratitude does not collapse under stress. It does not dwell endlessly on what could have been different. It moves forward with steadiness, with appreciation, with the ability to carry peace regardless of external circumstances. This is why the Stoics practiced gratitude, not because they ignored suffering, but because they refused to let suffering be the only thing they saw. A person who masters this practice does not need perfect conditions to be at peace. They create peace because they have learned to see what is already good, and in that ability, they find the rarest thing of all, not just fleeting happiness, but an enduring sense of fulfillment, one that follows them through every challenge, every change, every phase of life. A mind that has trained itself to recognize what is good, to focus on what strengthens rather than what drains, becomes a mind that is naturally resilient. But gratitude alone is not enough. It must be reinforced with an unshakable foundation of mental strength, a mindset so deeply rooted in calm that no external force can disturb it. This is not a mindset that appears by accident. It is built, tested, and forged through practice. The Stoics did not simply hope for peace in the midst of chaos. They trained themselves to create it, to remain steady when everything around them was uncertain, to cultivate stillness in a world that constantly tried to shake them. Many struggle to sleep, not because they lack time, but because their minds remain in a constant state of disturbance. Thoughts spiral, anxieties build, fears about the future take hold, and the body, in response, remains on alert, refusing to release itself into rest. This is what happens when the mind is untrained, reactive, and overly influenced by external chaos. A person who has not built a strong mindset will always be at the mercy of their environment, carried by the highs and lows of life, unable to settle into true peace. They will be awake not because they lack exhaustion, but because their mind has never learned how to be still. The Stoics knew that external events will always be uncertain, but inner stillness is a choice. They understood that no one can control the world, but everyone can control how they respond to it. This is why they focused not on changing circumstances, but on mastering themselves, ensuring that no event, no challenge, no external force could dictate their internal state. A mind that has achieved this level of discipline does not break under pressure, does not overreact to discomfort, does not allow fear, stress, or uncertainty to steal its balance. It remains steady no matter what is happening outside of it. Inner stillness is not passivity. It is not ignoring reality. It is the ability to stand firmly in the face of unpredictability and refuse to be consumed by it. The modern world constantly demands attention, constantly bombards the mind with information, constantly fills the air with noise. A person who does not actively train themselves to remain calm will always be swept up in this chaos, pulled in different directions, unable to settle, unable to rest. But a person who has built an unshakable mindset can face the same world and remain unbothered, knowing that peace does not come from external circumstances, but from an internal decision to remain undisturbed. This ability to remain calm under pressure is not natural. It is cultivated. The Stoics practiced it daily, testing themselves in difficult situations, training their minds to respond with logic rather than emotion, with clarity rather than panic. They did not expect life to be easy, nor did they wait for peace to come from outside forces. They built it within themselves, ensuring that no matter what happened, their inner world remained unaffected. This is why so many struggle with stress, anxiety, and sleeplessness. They believe that calm is something that must be given to them, that they can only be at peace when everything is in order. But life is never fully in order. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be unexpected challenges. There will always be something that could cause distress. The person who depends on external stability for their inner peace will never truly be in control. They will always be reactive, always affected, always waiting for conditions to improve before they allow themselves to feel calm. The Stoics rejected this approach entirely. They saw that emotional mastery was the only way to guarantee peace, that the ability to remain composed in any situation was the true source of strength. They did not allow emotions to control them, They mastered their responses, ensuring that nothing could shake them, that no external event could pull them away from their center. This did not mean they ignored their emotions. It meant they refused to be ruled by them. This level of control over the mind directly affects sleep. A person whose mind is constantly in turmoil, constantly reacting to problems, constantly unable to settle, will struggle to rest. Their body may be exhausted, but their mind will not allow them to relax. They will lie in bed replaying conversations, predicting worst-case scenarios, cycling through frustrations, unable to let go of the day. This is not because they do not need sleep. It is because their mind has never been trained to slow down, to detach, to remain still even in the face of unresolved concerns. A person who has built an unshakable mindset does not experience this battle. They may face the same problems, the same challenges, the same uncertainties, but they do not allow them to take control. They recognize that stress is not in the event itself. It is in how the mind chooses to respond. They train themselves to let go of what does not need to be carried, to release the things that cannot be controlled, to separate what is essential from what is unnecessary. And because of this, they sleep deeply, without disturbance, without overthinking, without the weight of a chaotic mind preventing them from resting. Emotional mastery is not about denying emotions. It is about understanding them, about knowing when they serve a purpose and when they do not. Many people hold on to stress because they believe it is useful, that by worrying, by over-analyzing, by keeping their minds active, they are somehow preparing themselves for the future. But worry is not preparation. Fear is not strategy. Overthinking does not solve problems. It only exhausts the mind and weakens the body. The Stoics knew this, which is why they trained themselves to act when action was needed and release when nothing could be done. They did not waste energy on things that were out of their hands. They focused on what was within their power and let go of the rest. This is the connection between emotional mastery and restful sleep. A person who has trained themselves to remain steady, to detach from unnecessary stress, to accept what they cannot change, will always find rest easier than the person who is still trapped in reactivity. Their mind is not battling itself. Their body is not in a constant state of tension. Their nervous system is not engaged in a fight that does not need to happen. They have developed the skill of releasing the day fully, ensuring that when it is time to rest, they do so completely, without resistance. The reason so many people struggle to achieve this is because they have never trained themselves in the art of stillness. They have never been taught how to step back from their emotions, how to pause before reacting, how to maintain control over their internal state, regardless of external events. The mind, left untrained, will always chase thoughts, will always seek stimulation, will always hold on to unnecessary worries. This is why stillness must be cultivated, just as strength is cultivated, just as endurance is built through repetition and effort. A person who has not yet mastered this will always experience life as chaotic. They will always feel as though they are being pulled in 1,000 directions, unable to find calm, unable to settle, unable to rest. But the person who has trained their mind in Stoic discipline does not experience this. They move through the same world, yet they remain unaffected. They face the same difficulties, yet they remain composed. They experience the same hardships, yet they do not allow those hardships to take control of their thoughts, their emotions, or their ability to live with clarity. This is the ultimate freedom, not the absence of chaos, but the ability to remain calm within it, not the elimination of stress, but the refusal to let stress dictate one's internal state, not the control of external events, but the mastery of one's own mind, ensuring that no matter what happens, sleep comes easily, rest is undisturbed, and the mind remains in complete command of itself. A person who has built an unshakable mindset does not rely on the world to be calm. They have made themselves calm, and because of this, they sleep deeply, live peacefully, and move through life with a kind of strength that no external force can break. A mind trained in discipline, gratitude, and inner stillness does not fear the night. It does not carry the weight of the day into the quiet hours. It does not spiral into restless thought, nor does it resist sleep as if it were an enemy. Instead, it releases. It recognizes that every day has its battles, but none of them belong in the sacred space of rest. This is the mindset that leads to deep, unshakable peace, the kind that is not dependent on circumstances, but built through practice, through choice, through a way of living that is both intentional and free. The Stoics understood that true control is not about forcing the world to conform to personal desires. It is about mastering oneself, ensuring that no matter what happens, the mind remains steady, the heart remains light, and the spirit remains untangled from unnecessary suffering. Sleep is not just a function of the body, it is a reflection of the mind. A mind that is at war with itself will struggle to rest, but a mind that has been trained in stillness will drift into sleep as naturally as the sun sets, effortless, unshaken, at peace. By integrating these lessons, releasing control, practicing gratitude, balancing effort with rest, mastering emotional detachment, and embracing the unpredictability of life, you create a foundation for a life that is not just well-rested, but deeply fulfilled. The practice of Stoicism does not remove difficulty from life, but it removes the unnecessary suffering created by resistance, by attachment, by fear. You cannot control what happens, but you can control how you respond. And when that response is built on wisdom, clarity, and discipline, peace is inevitable. So now the question is yours to answer. What lesson resonated with you the most? What is the one Stoic principle that you know will change your nights, your mornings, and your entire way of engaging with life? Drop it in the comments below and share your perspective. Your insight might be the one that helps someone else break free from sleepless nights and restless thoughts. If you found value in this, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel and be part of this growing community of people dedicated to mastering their minds, their emotions, and their lives. There's always another level of wisdom to uncover, another perspective to sharpen, another lesson to embody. Turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. And until then, sleep deeply, live wisely, and walk through life with the strength of someone who no longer fights what they cannot control.